This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Very good morning indeed to you. I'll just clarify something I said to you a moment ago. I said ordinary people are tempted to look away. What I mean by that, and by the way, I am an ordinary person in the context of that comment. If I didn't do this for a living, the temptation to spend the entire weekend replaying the whole of Ghost of Yotei on the PlayStation would be almost irresistible. And it is, of course, what is brilliantly reflected in that Leonardo DiCaprio film, Don't Look Up, although that is an allegory for climate change. It could just as easily be a war that threatens the security of the entire world. Question number one. How plausible is it to you that Benjamin Netanyahu would imperil the financial security, let alone the physical security of the entire world in order to keep his own sorry backside out of jail? I just wonder how plausible it is, because if it's not plausible, you haven't been paying attention. That's before we even turn our attention to Donald Trump and the likelihood of him undertaking something spectacularly stupid because of vibes or because of the last person that he spoke to making it sound like a good idea. It's so hideously dispiriting before you even register the personal impact, and thank whatever God you believe in that you don't personally face a flesh and blood threat at the moment, although loved ones might, friends might, family members might. The impact will hit us through our purses and our wallets, through our bank balances and our mortgages, and it is already beginning to pinch. It is already beginning to sting, and I am very, very, very sorry to tell you that it is only going to get worse. Full stop. Fact. Before it gets better. If and when it does begin to get better. And it has all been undertaken for reasons, and this is the thing, right? This is the thing that all of these weirdos, and another word that begins with W that I'm not allowed to say on the radio, are blind to or ignorant of or deliberately refusing to address. It was so obvious from the very start that letting these men lead an event like this without any rationale, any plan, any off-ramp, any justification, whether legal or moral, was going to end in disaster. The only question was, how big will this disaster be? And all of the weirdos and the word that begins with W that I can't say on the radio, writing their pathetic little columns in the Daily Telegraph or the Daily Mail or appearing on television or the radio to talk about how they've never been more ashamed to be British, or Keir Starmer should grow a pair and be more like Donald Trump, or I wish he was our leader. It is absolutely inconceivable that these people are still employed. In fact, it's arguably inconceivable that they're still at liberty. Such is the scale of their treachery and their betrayal of the national interest. It was visible from space how this was going to play out from the very first moment. Keir Starmer could see it. Didn't do the best job in the world of explaining it, but my God, he did a much better job of understanding it than anybody else in the political sphere in this country. And still the question hasn't been answered. Why are they doing it? Do you know what Netanyahu said most recently? He said most recently, we won't be able to change the regime from the sky. When Keir Starmer said that a couple of weeks ago, he was essentially called a quisling by the weirdos and that word that begins with W that I'm not allowed to say on the radio, who dominate public discourse in this country, not just in the political benches, not just the weirdo Tories and the W word I can't say on the radio, Reform UK people, but the media. So much of the media now was on side with it, not just on side with this, but opposed to their own country, opposed to their own Prime Minister, their own government, at a time of international peril when Keir Starmer, for all his faults, got absolutely everything right and continues to do so. Because the next big question, question number 4, which demands a different answer to question number 1, which needed a different answer to question number 2, which has a different answer to question number 3. Question number 4 will be about the Strait of Hormuz if things like this continue. I'll go with Wazzocks. We can go with Wazzocks, can't we? I think it has to begin with W. A few of you are suggesting rhyming slang. But I think bankers get a tough time. No, I don't. But we'll go with Wazzocks. And we still don't know why. This is the thing that I find most extraordinary and most... What's the word? There's got to be a German word for it. I know the Greek mythology. It's Cassandra, right? The prophet that nobody believes. I am sick to death of telling you what's going to happen next and then being proved right. I'm sick of it. I've been sick of it since 2016. It's not satisfying. It's not something to celebrate. It's not even something to be proud of, because you can't be proud of being right about something when you wish you were wrong. Since 2016, since we handed the steering wheel of this country to racists, liars and inadequates, every single corner, every bump, every sleeping policeman has been visible from 100 miles away, except to the people driving the car. And the cheerleaders, the pathetic, mealy-mouthed cheerleaders who dominate this industry, sitting on the sidelines cheering it on. You seen the story today about COVID? Boris Johnson told everyone who was sick and needed medical treatment to stay at home to keep the country safe, killed thousands of them. How much medical advice did he take from the qualified experts? Spoiler alert, none. Didn't even consult them. He's currently a columnist on the Daily Mail, receiving hundreds of thousands of pounds a year for his opinions. The man should be in jail. And still it continues. Still they wave their pathetic little flags, both the metaphorical ones and the ones they're sticking on lampposts up and down the country. These lemmings, these sheep, these pathetic people who will do whatever they're told to do by whatever bigot has got the microphone. And here we are, looking at... And I'll be okay. I'm always okay. I can pay my mortgage even if it goes up by a rate of knots. I can fill the car up with petrol, even if it doubles in price. I can do this. I'll be okay. But a lot of people won't be. And that's just the financial impact on this side of the world. Never mind the 1,000 people the Israelis have already killed in Iran. Never mind them. God forbid the people who are being killed in Lebanon as we speak, or the people who are being ordered to just leave their homes because Benjamin Netanyahu's got a particular bee in his bonnet and remains desperate to stay out of jail. Don't take my word for it. Oman's foreign minister has claimed that the US has lost control of its own foreign policy and accused Israel of persuading Donald Trump's administration to go to war with Iran. A conflict he described as catastrophic and a grave miscalculation. Funny that, because I was reading in the Times the other day by, flipping out, I've forgotten her name, that all of the Gulf states were really pleased about this and celebrating every bullet fired and every bomb dropped. Melanie Phillips. Funny that, isn't it? Writing in The Economist, the Omani minister who mediated the latest nuclear talks between Iran and the US offered in diplomatic language, an unusually damning assessment of the events leading up to the US and Israel's bombing of Iran and the war it has triggered. And do you know why? Jonathan Powell has told us, Keir Starmer's advisor, that the negotiators sitting around that table, presided over by this bloke, were very, very close to coming to the kind of settlement that Barack Obama managed to achieve when he was president and that Donald Trump set fire to during his first term in the White House. A settlement that massively limited and restricted Iran's nuclear capabilities and essentially put the kibosh on them ever developing a weapon for the foreseeable future. Now, why would Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump hate that? Well, because you can't tell lies about Iran's nuclear capabilities if Iran have signed an internationally sanctioned and very carefully scrutinised agreement not to do things that they're telling lies about them doing. But some of the bits are simple. Some of the bits are straightforward. Why on earth would Donald Trump want to destroy the nuclear agreement with Iran that Barack Obama presided over? Answer, because it was being properly implemented and international bodies were going into Iran on a practically daily basis to check that they weren't breaching its terms or lying. And at the time Donald Trump set fire to it, everybody was happy. But you can't tell lies about Iran's nuclear capabilities if Iran has signed an agreement not to develop the bombs that Benjamin Netanyahu's been claiming for 50 years that they're about 10 minutes away from dropping. And it was all visible from space. All of it. And now, because we are a weird and selfish species, we're going to notice because of the petrol pumps. We're going to notice because of the supermarket shelves. We're going to notice because of the mortgages. 3 interest rates on the cards, according to many experts, for you and for me, as a direct consequence of putting a deranged idiot in the White House and allowing him to be led into this ludicrous war by an Israeli Prime Minister with one priority and one priority only, which is keeping his sorry ass out of jail. And here we go. Here we are, dealing with the consequences of catastrophe caused by cretins. And don't forget, of course, anybody who's been correctly predicting, describing or warning about this is suffering from what idiots call Trump derangement syndrome. Absolutely incredible that we find ourselves in a place now where they are simultaneously telling us that the White House knew what Israel was going to do and didn't know what Israel was going to do. This with reference to the attack upon the gas facility. in Iran, the South Pars gas field, something that has impacts far, far, far beyond the Middle East. They knew about it and they didn't know about it at the same time. And then, of course, the attempts already by Donald Trump to pass the buck, to blame it on somebody else, on his social media. Israel, out of anger for what has taken place in the Middle East, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. Look, it would be funny, wouldn't it, if the stakes weren't so high, to reflect upon the fact that this sounds like an essay you have to write in primary school on Monday mornings called What I Did at the Weekend. A major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. And my daddy said a relatively small section of the whole has been hit. And my mummy said the United States knew nothing about this particular attack. This is from the pen, finger, brain of the president. The United States knew nothing about this particular attack, and the country of Qatar was in no way, shape or form involved with it, nor did it have any idea that it was going to happen. The United States knew nothing about this particular attack, and they are now, including him in terms, saying the polar opposite. They did it and they did... Well, just don't take my word for it. Listen to this. They did it and they didn't do it. They knew it and they didn't know it. They were informed and they weren't informed.
Thank you, Mr. President. You talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu about attacking the oil and gas fields.
Yeah, I did. I told him don't do that, and he won't do that. We didn't discuss. You know, we do... we're independent. We get along great. It's coordinated, but on occasion he'll do something, and if I don't like it, and so we're not doing that anymore.
Right, I'm going to do that again because I sometimes feel that we're the only people on the planet paying attention. This is his own Truth Social post, OK? You ready? The United States knew nothing about this particular attack. The United States knew nothing about this particular attack. This is him, the same bloke, within the same 24-hour window, talking about exactly the same attack.
Thank you, Mr. President. You talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu about attacking the oil and gas fields.
Yeah, I did. I told him don't do that.
I didn't, and I did.
And he won't do that.
Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Up is down. War is
independent.
peace.
We get along great.
Donald Trump is president.
It's coordinated, but on occasion he'll do something. And
Netanyahu giving a speech in the last few hours in which he insists that America was not misled into this war, which means he's absolutely blooming terrified that that narrative is gathering pace, and it's a narrative endorsed not just by the counter-terrorism chief in the United States of America, who has resigned in disgust, but also by the Omani foreign minister, who was on the brink of chairing a deal that would have actually returned the region to the position of relative stability and peace, albeit with a hideous regime still in place in Tehran. But there's a lot of hideous regimes around at the moment, and they're not all on that side of the world. It was about to be delivered. So Netanyahu, for reasons that you and I can speculate on until we're blue in the face, decided to blow the whole thing up. Why? Well, one theory would be you can't tell lies about Iran's nuclear capability if it has been cauterized, if it has been negotiated into retreat, if it has been Barack Obama'd. And we still don't know why they did it. We still don't know why they did it. But he's beginning, I think, to pass the buck. He's beginning to look around for scapegoats, and the worse it gets, the harder he'll try.
The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me, Marco, so involved, that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us. And
because of what Steve and Jared and Pete... Well, let's run through that. A property developer, his own son-in-law, a failed Fox News host, and Marco Rubio, who told us on day one that Trump did it precisely because he couldn't stop Netanyahu from doing it, and they wanted to get their retaliation in before the Iranians retaliated. Those are your four men who Donald Trump is now charging with informing his decision to undertake this war. The Omani foreign minister thinks he's just dancing to Benjamin Netanyahu's tune, and so does the former counter-terrorism chief who Donald Trump appointed and then subsequently stated that he didn't think he was very strong on security. Because who here wouldn't appoint a bloke in charge of counter-terrorism while simultaneously believing that they're not very good at security? So why did he do it? Answers on a postcard. Well, no, answers on the phone-in. Seriously. 3 weeks in and we're still asking this question. Why do you think Donald Trump did it? And the problem with a vacuum, and my God, you never get a more profound vacuum than when the people in charge are saying one thing and its polar opposite in the same breath. The United States knew nothing about this particular attack, said Donald Trump. I knew about this particular attack, said Donald Trump. You want to take a punt on which one is a lie and which one is the truth? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The truth is dead in moments like this. So why do you think he did it? 0345 6060 973. Why do you think he did it? Why do you think he undertook this war, supposedly for regime change, which Benjamin Netanyahu has now said cannot be achieved? Supposedly to deal with a nuclear threat, which he told us 9 months ago had already been neutralised, which wouldn't exist even in fantasy if the deal that Barack Obama signed when he was president had been allowed to remain. Why do you think he did it? And you can't let him off the hook, right? You can't say he's just a poodle dancing to Benjamin Netanyahu's tune. Even if it's true, he has to take responsibility for being pathetic, for being dunderheaded, for being depraved, for being corrupt, for being wrong. But it's not impossible that Netanyahu was the last person he spoke to, and Netanyahu's desperation to keep his own sorry ass out of jail has led us to the brink of one of the most hideous and impactful explosions in the Middle East that we've seen in 20 years. If not the most. So why did he do it? 0345 6060 973. Knowing what you know now, knowing that all of the worst-case scenarios have come to pass, knowing that Sir Keir Starmer was 100% right about everything, knowing that the right-wing media in this country, typified by people like Dick by name Little John at the Daily Mail, knowing that they have been not only proven hideously wrong, but dangerously, treacherously, catastrophically wrong about everything because their love of the racism and their love of the misogyny has blinded them to reality. Here's the man who makes me feel okay about being a racist, misogynistic word that I can't say on the radio for fear of offending Ofcom rules. So I'm going to back him to take us into war because I love the racism and the misogyny so much. That's all that's happened here from the point of view of the British commentariat. There's no other analysis. There's no other explanation except brain dead. That's it. They either are brain dead or they turned off their brains because they love the racism and the misogyny so much so they would follow this monstrous character into a war that is now going to hurt you. Not like it's going to hurt Palestinian people, not like it's going to hurt Lebanese people or Iranian people or even Israeli people. But it's going to hurt you in your pocket, in your wallet, in the things you can buy your children, in the holidays you can have, in the flights you can afford, in the mortgage you can't pay anymore, in the food that you have to cut back on because it's now costing more than it would have done if Donald Trump had never been president and Benjamin Netanyahu had never yanked his chain so hard that he started a war he can't finish. And you still don't know why he did it. Except, of course, you do, because you're about to ring me and tell me.
James O'Brien on LBC.
23 minutes after 10 is the time, and it is all linked. I sometimes despair at the obviousness of it. It is all linked. Two other big stories in the news today. The pandemic stay-at-home advice cost lives, and Sir John Curtis focusing on why Labour's Brexit focus has shifted from Leavers to Remainers. Why is it linked? Because the same engines of influence in this country, and thank God it didn't include the government for the first time in 15 years, the same engines of influence that persuaded the population of the United Kingdom that Boris Johnson would be a good person to be in charge when a pandemic hit our islands, and the same people that persuaded our population to vote to become the first in history to impose economic sanctions on itself, the same engines of influence, the same ecosystem of moral and intellectual corruption wanted Keir Starmer to go to war in Iran and wanted to march lockstep with Benjamin Netanyahu, the genocidal Prime Minister of Israel, and Donald Trump, the multiple felon President of the United States, while trumpeting about Judeo-Christian values, British values and family values. The level here, once you start tugging the threads of idiocy crossed with corruption, are absolutely off the scale. And here we are, paying the price, dealing with the consequences. And do you know what they're doing now? Do you know what all the people that sold you Boris Johnson, sold you Brexit, sold you Donald Trump as some sort of British ally, do you know what they're doing today? Yeah, they're trying to ban Muslims from praying in public, just like the Nazis did the Jews in 1930s Germany. That's what they're doing today. That's mission now. That's top of the to-do list. They're shifting the parameters of that conversation. Banning people from praying in public. Farage is there? Of course he is. Grubby little chancer. Nick Timothy's leading the way. Pathetic little man. Theresa May's campaign manager. The go-home van mastermind. The bloke who called a general election to increase Theresa May's majority and decimated it. Thick, thick, thick. Nasty, nasty, nasty. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And still dictating public discourse in this country so that your mum might not be able to pay her mortgage this time next year, and you're going to have to stop feeding the children the food that you want to feed them because you can no longer afford it. And you still can't tell me why he did it. 0345 6060 973. Assad's in Waltham Abbey. Assad, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Obviously, this is a very complicated and nuanced subject.
Is it, Assad? Is it really?
Well, unfortunately, it is, and that's why it makes for a fantastic conversation on the radio. Look, I think there's no denying, and I'm not going to go into the purported reasons why, but Israel certainly has a strong influence in America. And it's been like that for a long time. I don't think any other country would be able to align itself with America in the way that Israel historically has. So the starting point is that Donald Trump is in charge of a country that is very heavily influenced by Israel. And I think that coupled...
Which is not in and of itself problematic unless Israel is led by a man like Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, yeah, so you have to take the rough with the smooth, right? So if Israel was to ever have a prime minister who looks at things slightly differently, perhaps it would be a good thing, but it
did, of course, and they assassinated him.
Yeah, so there you go. But I think more than that, it's also got to do with the fact that Trump has these people around him who, are not the sharpest knives in the drawer. He is influenced by them. He just went into Venezuela and it was quite an easy operation. They bombed Iran a few months back. He was probably under the impression that perhaps Iran would be an easy target. A few nights of bombing, perhaps even a week of bombing, and they would give up and Trump would be glorious. The American voters would have even more confidence in him. And I think it's backfired. From the conversations and the press conferences that took place yesterday, America and Israel, it's clearly the case that they're not on the same page. And they're just trying to cover things up.
I salute your calmness. I really do. But you're describing things that nobody in favour of this excursion, or whatever, he called it an excursion, didn't it? Because I think he misheard the word incursion. But nobody in favour of this excursion, making it sound like a day trip to Bangor. Nobody in favour of this excursion 3 weeks ago would have even tolerated you suggesting that the things you've just described would happen, and they've already happened. United States and Israel not agreeing on what's happening or what should happen next. Benjamin Netanyahu saying it can't be solved from the sky when we were coming close to lynching Keir Starmer for saying that just a fortnight ago. Donald Trump simultaneously saying, I knew about it and I didn't know about it, while various members of the political establishment and the commentariat on this side of the Atlantic continue to blow smoke up his fundament. It's incredible what you're describing, and yet we still don't know why he did it, because it's not adequate simply to say he was led. How could he have been so stupid as to think it would be over in a weekend?
Yeah, I think you'd have more experience at this given your profession and how long you've been doing it for. But I tend to find that in the last 5 to 6 years, perhaps, there seems to be a big problem with people being able to back down from their starting position and almost admit that they misinterpreted it or they got it wrong. These days, you're always going to find an outlet which will support your view. People who you'll be able to push your view across to, even though the facts suggest that your view is totally incorrect. And I think it never used to be like that. I think people now are so stuck in the mud with their original position that to move away from your original position is a sign of weakness. And I think that applies both to the left and the right. And I don't think it used to be like that. And I don't know what the reason for that is, but people are almost not willing to come back from their starting position.
I am.
I am, because we're amazing people.
Keir Starmer is.
Yes, but, what is the problem with the with the other people? Why are they not able to change?
Well, I know why. I don't. The left is a different problem, a different proposition. Although I don't dispute your analysis, and of course we're using generalised terms. But for the right to generalise, they are seduced and hypnotised by the racism, the misogyny, and the climate change denial. So they will go along with anything that the head honchos in the worlds of racism, misogyny, and climate denial tell them to do. Literally. And look, here's someone called Roger describing it as British values. What a pathetic, ranting loony you are, James, writes Roger Ferndown. You're so anti this country, wanting to stand up for British values. You really should be taken off the air, as clearly you've lost the plot. So that's how somebody seduced by racism, misogyny, climate change denial, or some other mysterious non-existent thing, that's how they justify the fact that they're cheering along the polar opposite of what they told would happen 3 weeks ago when they were cheering it along. I think we might have a little look at his history just to lighten the mood. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention, quite incredibly, to a question that lots of people insisted they could answer very easily 3 weeks ago. Why is Donald Trump going to war in Iran? Oh, to change the regime. But Benjamin Netanyahu has just said that's impossible from the air. Oh, to limit their nuclear capabilities. But he told us 9 months ago that they'd been completely obliterated, and he blew up the treaty that Barack Obama had signed with Iran that everybody felt was going well. Oh, because there was no chance of a successful resolution to the negotiations that were going on between the US and Iran. Well, everybody else in that room says there was, including the Omani foreign minister who was chairing the bloody meetings. And he has now claimed that the United States has lost control of its own foreign policy and accused Israel of persuading Donald Trump's administration to go to war with Iran. A conflict that he has described, this is Badr al-Basaidi writing in The Economist magazine, as a catastrophe and a grave miscalculation. So what you're in favour of now is a catastrophe and a grave miscalculation. So anybody who says they're still in favour of this war, and I am going to go back to Idiot's Corner in a minute because it is illustrative to find out how I don't know what it is that sits behind their ears. I suppose technically we'd have to call it a brain. But it's illustrative and illuminating to find out what goes on in those spaces for people who are beyond help now, beyond all reason, because the war you were in favour of 3 weeks ago does not exist and never did. The people who you have followed into it lied to you. Whichever lie you believed, regime change, nuclear capabilities, failing negotiations, whatever it was, human rights abuses by the Iranian regime, condemned by a man who's undertaken a genocide and a man whose regime shoots its own citizens in the face on the streets of Minneapolis. Yeah, great. Moral arbiters there. Form an orderly queue to take lessons from them on what human rights look like and should involve. So whatever reason you believed when these liars lied to you, you now know you were lied to. So how can you possibly still be in favour of the war? Answer, because I'm a bigoted idiot. Or because I'm so in love with the racism, the misogyny and the climate change denial and the prioritisation of profits that I'll never see over everything else that I can't ever detach myself from these ludicrous bandwagons. Absolutely extraordinary. And yet, this is the world that we're living in. And we are not insulated from it or protected from it. Look at the headlines today. Even one of the cheerleaders for Donald Trump that Rupert Murdoch employs at the Times is Israel is losing the war with US public opinion. Trump may have started the assault on Iran, but for many Americans, if it fails, blame will lie firmly with the Jewish state. The speed with which these people detach themselves from their professional responsibilities when the consequences of their own actions become clear is supersonic. Supersonic. You're not supposed to just describe what's going on. You're supposed to explain why you were in favour of it. James Ball, who's brilliant, the political editor of The New World, he writes under the headline in The Eye today, Trump has either lost control of Israel or he's just lying. And it's that simple. The only question is, in the context of this war, whether he had any control over Israel in the first place or whether the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was telling the truth when he said we had to join in because we couldn't stop them from doing it. And then you ask the question of why did they do it? The answer was regime change, and Benjamin Netanyahu has now said that they can't affect regime change from the air. So they make liars of us all. Well, not me, but they make liars of all of their supporters. Ultimately, they all become liars. Because whatever reason you offered up for your pathetic and deluded support of this adventure has been rendered untrue by the people you support. I can't stress this point enough. I've been stressing it since 2016. They make liars of all of you. Whatever reason you gave for supporting Brexit, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries, they have made you into a liar. Because if you claim that you still support it, despite the fact that the reasons you gave for supporting it in the first place have been shown to be untrue, they have made a liar out of you. If you supported this war 3 weeks ago and you still support it today, they have made a liar out of you. Because the reasons they gave you 3 weeks ago have turned out not to be true. And I can forgive you for not being able to work that out for yourself at the time, although it wasn't very difficult. You've got no excuse now. So you become a liar. You become morally corrupt as a consequence of throwing your lot in with profoundly morally corrupt people. That's it. It's that simple. And of course, for our friend Roger, and here's one, Raymond, absolutely deranged this morning, James. You actually need help, pal. The sight of what they're seeing in the mirror on a morning like this is absolutely unbearable. Holding up a mirror and describing them syllable by syllable. Oh, my God, I supported Boris Johnson and he killed thousands of people during COVID because he didn't take any medical advice while telling the country what to do. Oh, my God, I voted for Brexit and I've brought my own country down as a consequence of my misplaced, false, bogus patriotism and believing liars. Oh, my God, I like Donald Trump because, hey, he's making racism cool again. And also misogyny's nice and she still won't let me see the kids at weekends. And climate change denial, for some reason I can't explain to you at all, is something that I love. And here you are looking in the mirror this morning and realising you're responsible for your own mortgage going up, your own food bills rocketing, your own holidays becoming unaffordable, looking in the mirror, seeing yourself staring back at you and getting cross with me, Raymond. Getting cross with me, Roger. Why do they all have names like 1970s hairdressers, these people? There's a mystery for the ages. 20 to 11 is the time. Gay is in Bath. Gay, what would you like to say?
Good morning. I'm a bit nervous.
Is it gay? Is it a good morning gay? Sorry, carry on.
It isn't, and I tell you, this isn't going to affect your listening figures, but if when you come off air, you go to Substack and listen to Malcolm Nance's daily briefing of what's going on, the whole world will be a lot better off. But I think this poor Trump is such an idiot that he would rather see the whole world suffer because he can't go back to the American people and say, well, sorry, couldn't keep the price of eggs down and,
They voted for cheaper petrol.
Yeah. And now I think he's saying, well, of course, it's got to go up. But he's taking the whole world with him. And he doesn't give a damn about anything. The only time he speaks with any passion and conviction is when he's lying to get himself out of another problem affecting him, like giving testimony. Well,
so why did he do the war?
Probably as a distraction.
It's not really working. I mean, they're going to have to start talking about the Epstein files soon to distract people from the Iran war.
Well, that hasn't gone away, has it? But I think...
hang on, I think that deserves a bit more, that line. Let's just... We're all looking for a little bit of light relief on a morning like this. But how long will it be before Donald Trump starts talking about the Epstein files again? Because he wants to distract from what he's doing in the Middle East.
I don't think he's ever going to start talking about the Epstein files again. But I think... the damage, if everything was to stop today and everybody packed up their planes and sort of went away and everything tomorrow is another day, the damage that has been caused so far won't go away for years and years and years because, you can redirect oil tankers around. You don't have to necessarily go. You could have there were alternatives in place for shipping oil. But now there's been a bombing of another area which is now not available to take basically the tankers have got nowhere to go.
These are the financial implications. Well, about 100 tankers are getting through, but they belong to countries that are not too closely allied with Donald Trump to have rendered them persona non grata in the area. And speaking of other regions, the war in Lebanon has now, according to the United Nations Children Agency, and many people may not know there's a war in Lebanon, it's a bombing campaign, essentially, or a military campaign by Israel that has now wounded or killed the equivalent of one classroom of children every single day. A whole classroom full of children, wounded or killed every single day since it began, and anybody left has been robbed, according to a top official of the UN Children's Agency of their own sense of normalcy since it began just 2 weeks ago. About 111 children killed, 334 children wounded since March the 2nd. Israeli airstrikes began. And that works out at about 30 children a day. So, I mean, we know why Benjamin Netanyahu is doing this, to try and keep himself out of court and quite possibly out of jail. Why is Donald Trump doing it? Why is Donald Trump doing it? Connor's in Manchester. Connor, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Connor.
Hi. Apologies if I come across as nervous. It's my first time ringing in.
Hey, well, don't worry. I'm in a very calm, collected and gentle mood today, Connor. You've probably picked up on it. There's absolutely...
you're really coming across like that,
There's no danger whatsoever of me biting anybody's heads off when I'm in this mood, Connor, so you're going to be absolutely fine, mate.
Yeah, so I heard you ask this question a couple of weeks ago, just to give some context to my answer.
Yes.
And I actually think some people are making it more complicated than what it actually is to me anyway, and maybe I'm just simplifying it too much.
Go on.
It just appears to be a twisted sense of legacy building. He seems to have an obsession with naming everything and building this empire around him. If it's from his hotels, if it's from the Kennedy Center, if it's towards the new battleships, if it was to the attempt on the Penn Station, it just seems to be thing after thing after thing of him building this image of a powerful man in his head before he eventually kicks the bucket, I guess.
Yes. I mean, even then, I don't even know if it's legacy, you know. Because I think I bet he was like this when he was 8. Do you know what I mean? I bet he was smearing his own name in excrement on the walls of his nursery.
Yeah, like I say, it just seems to be this weird compulsion to try and...
So how did that conversation go? How did they persuade him that this would make him look good? Because George W. Bush's approval ratings went up at a rate of knots when he undertook his war in the Middle East, and Trump is stupid enough to miss all of the non-parallels, all of the obvious differences between those two engagements. And the September the 11th attack allowed George W. Bush and his cheerleaders to essentially lie about the rationale for the war in Iraq. How would this conversation have gone? How would you have persuaded Donald Trump to do this?
In all honesty, I think it's to do with the fact. I reckon it's been a bit of a conversation between him and Benjamin Netanyahu, where they've sat down. Benjamin Netanyahu's kind of whispered a bit of poison in his ear, well, quite a bit of poison in his ear, turning around and saying, "Look look at the kind of legacy you'll leave behind if you help us take down Iran, and you know the biggest threat to America, wrongly, the biggest threat to America in the Middle East, you know." And then if convincing Donald Trump that if they were successful in Iran, he'd be this powerful, influential person of history in the textbooks when he goes.
I mean, maybe you will go down. They'll build a big statue of you.
That's what I mean.
It's just an appeal to ego, and of course, as we discussed this before, it's so hard to imagine somebody so devoid of intellect and introspection, somebody who is defined entirely by appetites. So we got a little taste of it with Boris Johnson in this country, but I think Boris Johnson is the sort of Temu version of Donald Trump. He's defined entirely by appetites, so he's only really interested in the next thing he can ingest, whether it's money, whether it's praise, whether it's, as you say, self-regard or getting his name on something, whether it's vanity. It's the appetite that must be fed, physical, emotional, vain, all of these things. And we can't process that as normal people because we are wondering about what's going to happen next week or next year, or we're wondering about what the world is going to be like when our children grow up, or if we press that button, what alarm goes off, or if we hurt that person, what consequences do we face? If we're nice to this person or we put money in that slot, we're constantly as humans thinking about consequences. Imagine living a life utterly, utterly devoid of them, where the only thing you ever think about is where your next fix is coming from. That's probably the best way to understand it. Addicted to praise, addicted to power, addicted to money, addicted to sexual assault by his own account, of course, addicted to these boosts, these injections of self-regard that do nothing to fill the gaping chasm inside him where the rest of us have a soul. So we can't, in a way, analyse him. But you're right. You're fixing the appetite that can never be sated. And somebody pressed the right button. Somebody said to him, "Oh, if you do this, then you will get this big feed. You do this, you'll get a whopping great injection of X. If you do this, if you bomb Iran, then we will feed you. And I don't know what they're feeding him. Are they just feeding him vanity? Are they just feeding him self-regard? Are they feeding him money? Who would rule anything out when this man is at the table? There's one thing missing so far from the analysis, and I will tell you what it is, or at least what I think it is, after this. 10:48 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:52, and it's hard to keep track, isn't it? But it is, I think, this morning on which Benjamin Netanyahu has said, or certainly in the last 12 hours, has said that you can't effect regime change in Iran from the air alone. And he has, finally, as many of us suspected and suggested that he would, started mooting the need for a ground war in Iran. Troops, boots on the ground. And, of course, remember, if you were in favour of this 3 weeks ago, you are not intellectually or morally capable of being in favour of it now, because the reasons they gave you were not true. I'm going to share something quite interesting. I'm going to shut Idiot's Corner now, because I think it's cruel. I don't think I can help people who are in Idiot's Corner, but it's busy today. First time in a long time it's been busy, which is possibly a consequence of the passion with which I unexpectedly found myself presenting the programme this morning. But every single critique is personal. So all you have now, in response to what I've been describing for 50 minutes, is calling me names, is insulting me. There's even one or two people still using the phrase Trump derangement syndrome. But literally nobody is trying to make a substantive or salient point about what is actually going on in the world. They are just sitting in the corner of their cage trying to fling excrement at me. That is it. That is the sum total of all of the negative texts, tweets and WhatsApps coming in to the programme. People using words like lefty. Here's one. I know I'm shutting it, but just because you think I'm exaggerating. James O'Brien is so lib towards Trump in his monologues. All the callers are the same lib-left callers. What is he going on about? You ring me, mate. Ring in now and tell me why this is going well. But, of course, you have to explain that you knew all along that they were lying 3 weeks ago when you said it was a brilliant idea. Every single negative message coming into the studio today, which is about 5% probably, which is quite high these days, is just calling me names or just being rude about me. And I think that's fantastic. Don't you? Because it's like a massive white flag. It's like, so, OK, I've got no arguments. Well, of course, people who use phrases like Trump derangement syndrome never had any arguments. It's the same with Brexit derangement syndrome. Or Brexit means Brexit, one of Nick Timothy's catchphrases, the bloke who's now trying to prohibit public prayer, just like the Nazis did in 1930s Germany. What do you do if you don't have any arguments, if you don't have anything intelligent, constructive or insightful to say? You just shout abuse at the other person. So here we are, providing fairly complex and detailed analysis of everything that's going on, up to and including quotes from the key players. And you respond to what you are seeing by pretending you're not seeing it, or that the messenger is the problem, or that what you're seeing in the mirror isn't you, but some sort of distortion of you that you're not responsible for, but I am. So I'm not going to read them out anymore, because I've got a horrible feeling that that's the closest thing you'll get to pleasure all day. I am wrong. I am ridiculous. I am pathetic. But O'Brien just read out my name on the radio, and that's the best thing that's happened to me all week. Just give your head a wobble, all right? 10:55 is the time. Mo is in Edinburgh. Mo, why did he do it?
Yeah, your words inspired me, to be honest with you, this morning, because it's Eid as well this morning, and it's a beautiful day in Edinburgh, and everybody's been really pleasant. But why did he do it? Because, as you say, he's being led by Israel, who is warmongering, who has no respect for international law. And the point about international law that I think people miss, we expect to respect domestic law and that nobody is above domestic law. But when it comes to international law, it seems that just goes out the window. The requirements for military action in international law are very specific. And in self-defense in particular, the imminent threat didn't exist. And for us to be fooled into believing that Iran could somehow attack the mainland United States, and these same empty statements being repeated from the highest office. The point, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous because I've never done this as well, but the point is that...
It gets easier, man.
Yeah, the United States, as the preeminent superpower, should be applying international law to itself to the highest standard, in order that everybody should understand this, in order that all the other countries fall into line and respect the law. But once you do whatever you want, and in this case, it's exactly whatever you want. It's just going ahead and making it up.
There's a piece of the jigsaw missing, because we can say, and the Omani foreign minister has said it, and the outgoing counter-terrorism chief in Donald Trump's own administration, appointed by Donald Trump, has said it, that Israel dragged the US into this war. But what we don't know is how. I like Connor's suggestion that they've promised him a statue, or they'll claim that he brought peace to the Middle East and no other president had managed to do that. And even 6 months ago, Mo, I'd have said, come off it. Nobody's stupid enough to believe that. But Trump is, isn't he?
No, presumably they're having negotiations, and he feels that, if Israel's going to attack, then he has to be the biggest guy in the room, and he has to join in. I don't know. When you hear Caroline Leavitt and Pete Hegseth, supposedly they have unbelievable intelligence, but when you hear the president, he's rambling, nonsense. So,
Is it Phil? This will bring peace. This is what they said to him. This will bring peace to the Middle East, and it will make you the greatest president ever. And you can imagine him believing that. But even then, are we over-analysing? It's not a question of whether he believes it or not. That just pleased him in that moment, so he did it.
Yeah, I think it's American adventurism at its worst,
It's beyond that, mate. It's beyond that. American adventurism explains many 20th century decisions and escapades and CIA-influenced regime changes and all those sort of things, because no one portrays America as a saint. But this is something very different, not least because, as you've just alluded to, Mo, because of the people around him. J.D. Vance's entire political career is based on isolationism. Literally, he is built upon the premise that the United States should never get involved in any foreign wars. And he wants to be a presidential candidate in 2028. How? Apart from people sending me insults on social media without being able to pick a single hole in what I'm describing, because that's all I'm doing. I'm not even analysing. I'm just telling you what's happened, what you've ended up being in favour of. What would you even say? What would they say about what they are actually supporting now, when it's the polar opposite of what they were told they were supporting 3 weeks ago? And Donald Trump will say two completely contradictory things in the same breath. We didn't know about the attack on the South Pars gas field, and we did know about the attack on the South Pars gas field. Riddle me that.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Why did Donald Trump go to war? 0345 6060 973. There's still room for a lot more answers, but of course what you can't do is provide the reasons that he gave at the beginning of the war, because they have all been contradicted by him or fallen apart in the cold light of day, up to and including the idea that regime change could be achieved, because Benjamin Netanyahu, his ally at least in this project, has now said that it can't be achieved from the air. So why did Donald Trump do it now that we know, which we didn't know 3 weeks ago, but we did suspect, now that we know none of the reasons given for doing it are true? 0345 6060 973. I'm not moving on yet, but I will just highlight a couple of things for you about how this happens and how we end up in this country, my personal concern, if not obsession, with an ecosystem that allows these lies to flourish, that allows these lies to prosper. And it is linked to other things where liars have prevailed. It's linked to Brexit, because liars prevailed, and they couldn't prevail unless the ecosystem had been completely corrupted. The ecosystem of public discourse, dominated by paid contributors, commentators, pundits, and latterly politicians. And the other example, the best example in today's newspapers, in today's news, is COVID. Is the fact that Boris Johnson was in charge of this country and its response to a global pandemic. And he was responsible for thousands of lives being lost, because the advice that him and Matt Hancock gave, this is a consequence of the inquiry being chaired by Baroness Hallett, the High Court judge, has reported that the stay home, protect the NHS, save lives message, which had absolutely no medical rationale behind it, inadvertently sent the message that healthcare was closed, which meant that people didn't seek it, which meant that people died. That's what happens when you put liars in charge of important things. And that's what happens when you have an ecosystem in which the liars are never challenged, because those liars have all been rewarded. If they haven't got a Daily Mail column, they've got a knighthood. Almost all of them. Almost all of them. And what have they moved on to now? Calling for Muslims to be prevented from praying in public. It's how pathetic they are, how predictable, how tragic their bigotries are. Because bigotry and dishonesty aren't just cousins, they're like sort of conjoined twins. You can't separate bigotry from dishonour. You can't be a bigot unless you're a liar. And you can't be a bigot unless you lie to yourself. There are liars who aren't bigots, but there are no bigots who are not liars. If you put the lying bigots in charge, we all suffer. So you've got Brexit, you've got COVID, and now you've got Trump. And they can't detach from it. But neither can they tell you why he did it. But we can work it out together. But here's a little example of how bent everything is. This is from the front page of the Telegraph earlier in the week. I'm going to play you first Donald Trump speaking in the Oval Office. OK, this is about the BBC. After the Daily Mail used doctored quotes of a BBC documentary to argue that the BBC had doctored quotes in a Trump documentary. All of the words that came out of Trump's mouth came out of Trump's mouth. It's absolutely crucial that you understand this. There was no AI manipulation. It wasn't one of those deep fakes where they create a simulacrum of Donald Trump and put words in his mouth. Everything that the BBC did, foolishly, with regard to cutting and splicing footage to put the order in which things were said different from how they were actually said, it all happened. But here's Donald Trump describing it earlier this week.
The BBC took it a step further. They actually they put words in my mouth and I said some pretty bad things. And I didn't say them. It was AI generated. And I said, I never said that. In fact, some of my people said, wow, that was pretty bad stuff you said. I said, what did I say? I'm pretty good at this stuff. I mean, if you can go through years of these press conferences and you're a popular president of the United States that won in a landslide, that won all 7 swing states, that got record numbers of votes. I mean, so I guess I'm okay at this stuff. I said, I never said that. And then we found out it was AI generated. And they admit they made a mistake. It was very inaccurate news. It was fake news. So I'm very proud of the term fake news because it was my term. I came up with it, but it's no longer accurate. It really is. It's corrupt. Fraudulent news. It really is. It's fraudulent. It's not just fake. It's beyond fake.
And this is how it was reported on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And there are some helpful gaps here, which is where the Daily Telegraph removed words that did come out of Donald Trump's mouth. In other words, they changed the order in which he spoke. See if you can spot what's missing from how the Daily Telegraph chose to report the comments that you have just heard. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a primer, if I may. I want you to listen out for when the Daily Telegraph quoted him claiming that the BBC had used AI to generate entirely fake footage of him saying things that he never said.
It's corrupt, fraudulent. And if you watch BBC, it's almost like they're fighting us to a draw. It was very inaccurate news. It was fake news. So I'm very proud of the term fake news because it was my term. I came up with it, but it's no longer accurate. It really is. It's corrupt, fraudulent news. It really is. It's fraudulent. It's not just fake. It's beyond fake. It's really criminal what they do.
So that's the editor of the Daily Telegraph electing to remove entirely from that speech by Donald Trump the blatant and obvious, provable, immediate lies, and instead to cut and edit those comments solely to constitute an attack, an unhinged attack upon the BBC. I'm the only one who's noticed this. I'm not boasting. It's a lonely place to be. I'm the only one who's noticed this. When the Daily Telegraph got handed a report by a bloke who had also misquoted Donald Trump, something that only James Ball at the New World noticed, and everybody pretended that this was some hideous outrage, it ended up with the chairman and the head of news at the BBC resigning. I am now pointing out to you that the editor of the Daily Telegraph has edited Donald Trump's comments to remove blatant and obvious lies and leave instead an uninterrupted, unhinged diatribe against the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. And I think I'm the only one who's noticed. That's how bent things are. You think, perhaps, understandably, that I sometimes sound as if I must be exaggerating or existing in some sort of parallel universe. But that is what happened there. That's and for the avoidance of doubt, the second thing you heard is a verbatim recording of Donald Trump's words as reported on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. What we've removed from the second thing you heard is the bits that the Daily Telegraph did not report in their front page attack on the BBC. They've completely removed the bits of Donald Trump lying through his teeth and left in the bits where he accuses the BBC of having poor journalistic standards. And I think we should reflect for a moment on the absolute irony of that moment. So they've removed what? They've removed all of the blatant lies. Their readers, if they're relying on the Daily Telegraph for a version of events, their readers are being lied to. They have no idea that Donald Trump has lied about the BBC in terms. I mean, in absolutely extraordinary terms. But if you're a Daily Telegraph reader, you don't know that. And what's the piece about? Oh, it's Donald Trump attacking the journalistic standards at the BBC and accusing them of being liars. And what have the Daily Telegraph done? They've removed Donald Trump's blatant lies. Did the BBC tell any lies? No. Did they foolishly edit footage to make it look like Donald Trump had said things in a different order from the one in which he actually said them? Yes, they did. What did the Daily Telegraph do? Oh, it just removed lies. What did Donald Trump claim? That they used technology to create a kind of image of him to say things he never actually said. Did he actually say them? Yes, he did. Did the Daily Telegraph know that? Yes, they do. Do they understand that Donald Trump was lying to the world? Yes, they do. Did they remove the lies from their coverage in order to pursue a ludicrous political agenda against the BBC? Yes, they jolly well rootin' tootin'ly did. And who else cares? Do you care? Why did Donald Trump go to war against Iran? 0345 6060 Varun is in Wells in Somerset. Varun, what would you like to say?
You're an intelligent fellow, James.
Let's not get carried away, Varun. Let's not get carried away. It was all going so well. Fake news.
What was that quote? Was there a quote from Churchill that said something about the truth? But by the time that
the time it's got its trousers on, the lie is halfway around the world. I don't know who said it, but my goodness me, they knew what they were talking about.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the problem, because by the time you've told one lie, by the time the truth has come out, another lie has been told.
Yes.
Now, look, we've got to be honest about it. That Donald Trump has the IQ of a lump of coal, and I'm being really cruel to coal here. But it's clear that behind him there are people who have a semblance of intelligence or have an agenda of their own, or an agenda in which they create money. I mean, we have Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who is not, I believe, elected by anyone to be doing what he's doing. Yet there seems to be, the new Trump Towers in Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. So
I think he became a billionaire in his own right last year.
Oh, well, good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, hurrah.
I mean,
hey?
it's funny how you talk about...
With my obsession, sorry, just to interrupt, but with my obsession of tying everything together, the people who are all in favour of these clowns are, of course, the people who insisted we had to leave the European Union because of unelected bureaucrats.
Let's not go into Brexit.
Let's not go into Brexit. Let's not do that. We might do that from 12. Carry on, Varun.
Absolutely. But we talk about the oil situation, but he went to Venezuela and obviously he wanted to... regime change, but obviously that was for the oil. Obviously, Iran is to do with the oil as well, because he believes that he can squeeze somehow China and, of course, Russia, because, they need oil. It was interesting that I believe that Russia are now allowed to sell some of their oil.
Yes, the biggest winner so far from all of this is Vladimir Putin.
So in the end, someone must be getting a kickback somewhere, and we know
obviously
that.
We don't know that. I mean, it is a theory that you're putting forward. Well, no, mate, it's libelous.
So how did Kushner become a billionaire last year? Are you telling me that he was working hard?
It's a compelling theory that you are sharing, of which at this point in history it would be impossible to prove. But the idea that many people in the Trump regime and family have become immeasurably richer since he became president. That is a matter of fact. Now, it could be a complete coincidence, Varun, or it could be evidence of legal, but what we would call unethical or immoral behaviour, or it could be evidence of corruption. But you cannot state the latter without caveats galore. And that is how it should be, because we care about laws and we care about truth. We care about what is provable and what is unprovable, and we don't want to become like the Daily Telegraph, who couldn't give a monkey's about any of it.
Don't you find it quite interesting, though, that Trump surrounds himself with mouthpieces, people like Hegseth and people like that, who actually, just like him, share a single, if zero-digit IQ. But behind them, there are strategists. It's obviously the same happened with Boris Johnson. I mean, he was all faff. And when they come out with these lies, there must be a little group of people, almost like little mice, who are working away, thinking, how can we get round this? And they're doing it on a daily basis. Now, you say, how did Trump get in the first place? Obviously, he was voted there. And it seems to me that there wasn't, especially in America, the people there believed, I suppose rightly, that there was no good alternative. And I think the same obviously happened over here. And, in the end, they got rid of Johnson and they got, Keir Starmer, and they're now not happy with him. But who is the alternative? And unfortunately, the alternative
they didn't want Starmer, mate. They just, the flush was so comprehensively busted by the end of Rishi Sunak's administration that they did everything they could. They even tried to make the British public get cross about a donkey sanctuary, but it just didn't work anymore.
Exactly. So, but the problem is people like Farage and Trump, they tell the people what they want to hear. And unfortunately, we've got to a situation
but they've
now
got this wrong. They've got you're enjoying your analysis, I don't disagree with it. But they've got this wrong. That's what I find so interesting about it, and it's why perhaps we are left with little choice but to speculate about what has gone on in secret in darkened rooms between people who shouldn't really be involved in government at all because nobody has elected them, and in one case they've been appointed solely because they happen to be married to the president's son. But what they told him, if we move on from suspicions of blatant backroom corruption, instead into the territory of what on earth was he told? Why did he do it? If it is to be a comprehensible and a categorizable answer, then I mean you're arguably left with an even bleaker analysis. Varun, thank you. You've made me a bit late for the news, but for the next break. But I just want to read you something from Newsweek magazine in 2017, because it just plays directly into one of the points that Varun made. Jared Kushner, this is Donald Trump's son-in-law, reportedly will be present at the meeting between President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday. This is back to the first term. And the events mark the first opportunity for the quiet presidential advisor to see cemented at the highest levels ties that his father first developed with the feisty, controversial Israeli leader in the 1990s, for which he paid dearly. Kushner's father, a real estate developer called Charles, went to federal prison after a family feud that involved, among other matters, forking over millions of dollars to politicians, including hundreds of thousands in speaking fees to Benjamin Netanyahu. That was something that was being reported in the United States of America in February of 2017. And, of course, Kushner is now in the room where all of the negotiations happen. So, I mean, whose interest is he there to represent? And is there any difference between the interests of Benjamin Netanyahu and the interests of Donald Trump's negotiator? I don't know. But it's important that people know this stuff, because if you don't, you could end up falling for ever bigger lies. 19 minutes after 11 is the time. Phone lines are still open. Why did he do it? Why did he go to war in Iran? Because if you were in favour of it 3 weeks ago, you can't be in favour of it now. The reasons you were given have been disproved. They have been rendered false. They have been rendered fake. So why did he do it? It's 11:19.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 21 minutes after 11. A little bit of light relief, because my goodness me, we need it. So Kemi Badenoch launched something yesterday. I'm not sure what, but James Cleverly was charged with introducing her to the stage. And then this happened.
Let's just remind ourselves with a quick look at her best bits.
It's going to be long. It's going to be long.
This is where the video comes on, please.
UVT.
Keep talking down.
Okie dokie.
Just pretend it's the royal wedding.
I'm going to give it one more second for the video. Actually, you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Forget the video. Let's just listen to Kemi Badenoch.
I mean, Armando Iannucci, not for the first time in recent memory, sitting there with a script going, oh my God, I've been superseded by reality. I can't take the mickey out of this shower because they take the mickey out of themselves far more effectively than I ever could. I'm going to play this again, not the whole thing, I think, but I just want you to listen to James Cleverly's laughter, and I want you to tell me whether or not it sounds entirely sympathetic to Kemi Badenoch. That's all. I'm just feeling a bit mischievous. And as I said, we can all do with a giggle, so thank you once again to Kemi Badenoch for providing us, if on this occasion somewhat unwittingly, with a bit of a belly laugh. But have a listen to James Cleverly's belly laugh and tell me whether you think that sounds like a man who is feeling uncomfortable on behalf of the person being humiliated.
Let's just remind ourselves with a quick look at her best bits.
It's going to be long. It's going to be long.
This is where the video comes on, please.
UVT. Keep talking down.
There, that laugh there. I mean, that's almost up there with that hideous noise Farage made the other day, that we sort of clipped up and played it independently of context. But that laughter there from James Cleverly sounds like something out of sounds a little bit like Sid James in a Carry On film. I'm not sure that laughter there was dripping with sincere. Well, it was sincere, but I don't think it was dripping with sympathy. I could be wrong. And while Keith's got his a trigger finger out while we're playing clips or we're firing clips like this. I'm going to play you one that a lot of you have pointed out to me. I don't know how to talk about this, and there are two reasons for this. One is it's beyond hideous. The second is I saw one of Trump's idiot children describing it as brilliant. And you worry, don't you, particularly when Idiot's Corner is open, and for the avoidance of doubt, it's shut today because nobody's got anything interesting to say. It's just insults and abuse of me, which I'll enjoy reading, but I don't think it would be fair to inflict it on you. But you just wonder whether this will curry favour or support or admiration from the kind of boneheaded people who are still cheering on Donald Trump, and, because it is all linked, albeit sometimes somewhat obliquely, they're still cheering on Donald Trump and Boris Johnson and Brexit and austerity and probably Liz Truss and all the rest of it. But this is a moment that historians of the future will struggle to believe, because the person in the room sitting next to Donald Trump in front of the world's television cameras is the Prime Minister of Japan.
Why didn't you tell US allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran? So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing, you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me. No, you believe in surprise, I think, much more so than us. And we had to surprise him, and we did.
What is the word you'd use? Verbal incontinence? Absolutely no control over his mouth. And that's the second time this week. What was the first time? Can we remember? There was another moment in the Oval Office where he said something and the sycophants couldn't quite cover up their shock and disgust quickly enough. It was when he described the governor of Florida as the president of the United States of America and then tried to insult him for being very open about his dyslexia. I think can we dig that out as well? Because I think these are moments. Where you realise that the Emperor's court know that he's naked. Is it Hans Christian Andersen, the Emperor's New Clothes But the bit that you miss when you're a kid reading it is that they all knew he was. Well, you don't miss that bit, but the boy is the hero of the story. The boy in the crowd, it's a living, shouting, he's naked, but everybody knows he's naked. They just have to pretend. That whether or not they believe that only clever people can see the clothes, so they're all pretending they can see the clothes because they're terrified that the world will think they're not clever, or whether they know it's all a load of hokum, but because the emperor believes it, they have to go along with it. And these moments, and it's only twice that it's happened now, to my knowledge, although if you've got other examples, it would be nice to put together a compendium for next week. These moments where even the most carefully curated and choreographed room full of sycophants, full of fraudulent sycophants. Even there, sometimes he is so hideously crass that they just need a moment to collect themselves before they can start pretending that he's not hideously crass. So we'll listen first again to what happened yesterday with the Prime Minister of Japan in the room. And you can hear, I think you can hear, and remember that the room will be full of sycophants, but there will also be members of the Japanese party there as well, not to mention the Japanese Prime Minister looking at Donald Trump with a face that is almost beyond description. I mean, by which I mean she can't quite believe what she's seeing and hearing. So here comes that, and then we'll remind ourselves of what happened when he started attacking Gavin Newsom by calling him Gavin Newscum, which is hilarious, and mocking him for having dyslexia, while also somehow christening him the President of the United States of America. So listen, what I want you to listen for is the reaction of the room, because I find it very interesting. So this is yesterday.
Why didn't you tell US allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran? So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing, you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me. No, you believe in surprise, I think, much more so than us. And we had to surprise him, and we did.
And of course, it was disgusting what he said about Gavin Newsom, but it wasn't that clip that I was thinking of. It was this one where he, what does he do? I mean, he forces or compels his colleague to reveal that somebody has received a terminal diagnosis. I mean, just listen to this, but crucially, once again, listen to the room.
Congressman Dunn is a real champion and a patriot because he's still coming to work, and if others got this diagnosis, they would be apt to go home and retire. And
what was the diagnosis?
It was, I think it was a terminal diagnosis.
He would be dead by June.
Okay, that wasn't public, but yeah, okay, that's it was grim. That's what I was going to say.
Listen again to that, because the room. That's when you know what, I talk a lot about mirrors. You hold up a mirror, and a lot of people will be very cross with the person holding up the mirror because of what they see in it. These moments speak to that phenomenon for me, because almost everybody in that room is a sycophant and a cheerleader for Donald Trump, and yet there are moments where even they can't avoid the evidence of their eyes and ears.
Congressman Dunn is a real champion and a patriot because he's still coming to work, and if others got this diagnosis, they would be apt to go home and retire. And
what was the diagnosis?
It was, I think it was a terminal diagnosis.
He would be dead by June.
Okay, that wasn't public, but yeah, okay, that's it was grim. That's what I was going to say.
And of course, the whole point of that exchange was to allow Donald Trump to boast about how loyal Neil Dunn, the dying congressman, is, by revealing that he was. Well, you heard it. I don't need to tell you how disgusting that was, or how disgusting the comments about Pearl Harbor were. But what's interesting is the fact that when you sit here thinking, do people go along with it? Do they like it? Do they? And then every now and then there's a little chink in the armour of their sycophancy because the light gets through, and they can't avoid, in those moments that pass ever so quickly, they can't avoid the horror of what they have become. It's not enough to say what Trump has turned them into, because it's a choice. They can't, in those moments, avoid the absolute horror of what he is, but even more crucially, of course, what they have become. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question continues, although we will hear shortly from one of my favourite callers who thinks that we are asking the wrong question. So if that's not a reason to stay tuned, then I don't know what is. Before that, though, Alan is in Nottingham. Alan, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello, Alan.
First time caller. I'm a bit nervous, so just...
It's only me. It's only me, mate.
For me, I think he's underestimated what his intentions were. I think he tried to replicate what he did in Venezuela at the beginning of the year. So obviously they captured the leader of Venezuela and brought him over to America. And one of the first things that Trump came out with was basically all the oil now in Venezuela is ours. And, you know, we now effectively have, want control or have control of Venezuela.
Yeah.
And I think he thought he could probably do similar in Iran. And I think one of your LBC...
Someone persuaded him he could, but anybody with a brain would have known that he couldn't.
Absolutely, yeah, but this is Donald Trump. I mean, when you think the man can't stoop any lower, another day comes around and he does. I think one of your LBC colleagues, I can't remember who, said a line once of, if you want to know Trump's methodology and his thinking, follow the money. And I think you look what he's done with Ukraine, for example. So, Zelensky, the relationship with Zelensky is, I think the way Zelensky has been treated has just been absolutely appalling. And he had him over a barrel at one point when it came to the withdrawing of the intelligence and the withholding of arms and this, that, and the other, until he struck a deal to get access to the rare earth minerals. Greenland was hot on his agenda not that long ago about wanting to take over Greenland for supposedly for America's national security, but Greenland has also got lots of rare earth minerals.
The story yesterday that I forgot to mention on air about Greenland's preparedness for an invasion. So the Greenland was shipping ordnance to... or Denmark was shipping ordnance to Greenland in preparation for repelling a land invasion by a NATO ally. In Denmark's case.
I mean, the very thought of it it beggars belief.
But we're overwhelmed with it, Alan, because, I mean, that would have been the biggest story in town for a week a few years ago.
Absolutely.
And it barely got a mention yesterday.
I know. And it's just, I think we all, well, not all of us, but I think quite a fair few of us prepared ourselves for Trump 2.0 to be a lot worse than the first version of Trump. But I mean, my God, he's just going to a whole new level. I mean, he's even now mentioning about Cuba is another one in his sights, and how he...
The thing I'm just making noises, but because you got my brain whirring. And what you've highlighted is something that we may never know the answer to, and it's the tension between personal enrichment, of which there has been a hell of a lot, and vanity. So, in terms of the rare earth minerals, is he pursuing a piece of the action, a taste, as they call it in corruption circles? Let me have a taste, or is he trying to secure something for the benefit of the United States of America, because that will enhance his sense of self or his sense of legacy that an earlier caller spoke of?
Both.
Yeah,
I think it could be a mixture of both. I mean, obviously, America in its own history is coming up for its 250th anniversary of independence, and I think if he'd been able to have done in Iran similar to what he did in Venezuela by removing the leader, putting a more favourable one in charge, possibly striking a deal where he could get, more access to the oil and the gas and everything else, and almost got like a quick return, then, this kind of also falls, I think, into place with, a very, very big anniversary in America's history, where he could then turn around to his people and say, look what I've done in Venezuela, and look what I've done in Iran.
So it's not unlike Tony Blair following on his successes in Kosovo and Sierra Leone by going for the hat-trick in Iraq. But at least that was technically feasible. What's extraordinary about this analysis, and possibly the most Trumpian element of it all, all is the fact that nobody with a brain would have possibly thought it was possible to do what he was persuaded to believe was possible, which is why so many roads do lead back to Benjamin Netanyahu, not just the ones described by his own counter-terrorism chief who resigned, and by the foreign minister of Oman who was chairing the negotiations designed to bring a peaceful solution to the problems that ostensibly caused the war, and who persuaded Donald Trump that it would be over by tea time. That's the question.
And also, if we look at what he did, in regards to the support for Israel and obviously what's happened in Gaza over the last couple of years, again, it wasn't that long ago where Trump was talking about, once the conflict was over in Gaza was going to be rebuilt into this, almost like plaza of skyscrapers and gold statues. And it all boils down to the power and the money. And for me, if anyone tries to decipher what Trump is thinking, you've just got to think about what power can he get out of it and what money can he get out of it.
Or if we were to simplify it even further, what appetite will be fed? And it can be any one of those. There's this wonderful piece that my friend Edward Docks wrote, I think last January, using ogres as the language to understand Donald Trump. Is that we are not ogres, you and me, Alan, in that if we eat today, then we know it will have consequences tomorrow, or we prioritise praise and sycophancy over integrity and honesty, then we know that there'll be a price to pay, and also we'll be uncomfortable with it. But if you're an ogre, you're just reaching for things. You're reaching for food. You're grabbing women by their private parts. You're dropping bombs because you think it'll make you look good. You're smearing your name all over the Kennedy Center because you think it will make you feel like this is appetites. And it's a slightly more sophisticated version of follow the money, because there's more to it than money, but it's just as base. And it's just as vulgar, and it's just as utterly and entirely devoid of integrity. I don't know what you were nervous about, mate.
I mean, just one final point, and I'm sure you'll have other people to speak, but I think people also forget this is the man that met Vladimir Putin and rolled out the red carpet for him and took a ride in the car together. In terms of his moral compass is non-existent. There is no morals when it comes. This is nothing to do with when it comes to Iran removing don't get me wrong, the regime in Iran was a horrible, evil, nasty regime.
Still is, mate.
Exactly, but his reasoning for doing this is nothing to do with the removal of a regime.
It's always him. What's in it for me? Or not even what's in it for me, because that has at least a patina of logic to it. But what have I been persuaded I can get out of it? In this case, almost certainly by people who were lying, which is why the splits have already appeared, which is why there are already distances and attempts to pass the buck, whether he will try to blame it all on Benjamin Netanyahu or whether, as we've already heard, actually, he will try to blame it all on Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and Pete Hegseth. You think I'm exaggerating? You think I'm making it up? Here he is.
The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me, Marco, so involved, that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us. And
Michael is in Greenwich. I've kept you on hold for ages. Sorry, Michael. What's on your mind today?
No, that's okay, James. Thanks. I'm fine. It was good listening.
Oh, that's a relief.
Yeah, I think we might be asking the wrong question at this point. And it's hard to decide why Donald Trump does anything. But the question I have is why do the American people, why do we, I'm American, continue to support him? His popularity is at about 40%. It hasn't diminished substantially. At least one report says the MAGA support is at 100%. And I think this is important because if people think, oh, it's just Donald Trump and at some point in some way he's going to leave, but that doesn't mean that automatically we're going to go back to a reset that we were before him. The reason he's able to do what he does is because we, the American people, have given him this immense power, which really belongs to the American people. But we've put it into his hands, and no one that I'm hearing is demanding it back, that he give this power back.
Who should be doing that?
That concerns me.
Yeah, I bet it concerns you. For people who don't know, Michael is a former US diplomat. Who should be making those demands?
Well, Congress, first of all, they have a legal responsibility, a constitutional responsibility.
What do you think is staying their hand then? I mean, polling notwithstanding, why is nobody doing the right thing?
I think because the Republican Party in some ways has become a personality cult. It's hardly a political party anymore. But I think there are elements of American culture that are pretty profound and pretty deep that would allow, to kind of encourage people like Donald Trump. And who are we as Americans? Who went to America? Well, if you had anything to leave behind, you didn't go. Who emigrates?
Yeah, yeah.
And for lack of a better word, I would say that the majority of Americans, or people who immigrated, regardless, from where in the world they originated, were peasants. And that's not a derogatory term.
No, of course not.
They were agricultural laborers, the people who had nothing. So they left. Now, what common traits do peasants have, whether they're Irish or Chinese or South American? They distrust government. Government never did anything for them.
And he's tapping into that on a scale that is probably still not fully appreciated.
Yeah, I think
He's become the ungovernment. He's the ungovernment in a way.
Yeah, he was going to dismantle government. He was the anti-government candidate. Also, peasants don't trust intellectual activity. Pure intellectual activity doesn't get you anywhere. Cunning does. If you're so rich, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? Most people I ask, can they name me one American philosopher? They're pretty hard pressed to come up with a name. You ask people do you name a French philosopher? They can come up with a number. Because Americans, when you ask about who are sort of the intellectual giants of America, they come up with Henry Ford or Thomas Edison or Zuckerberg, people who have made huge amounts of money and they have contributed a lot technologically, but it's not raw intellect. There's this distrust of intellectualism that runs really deep in American culture.
And that explains. I mean, I feel now I'm almost galloping to the defence of American culture. I was about to start. I was about to start listing novelists, and there was one philosopher who sprang to mind, but he's all over the Epstein files, so that would be a fairly uncomfortable little person to cite as well. But why? So what you're making me frightened of, because you're right, and the personal polling is extraordinary, because the war polling is terrible. So some of the NBC had a poll at the beginning of the war that had American sympathies evenly divided between Israel and the Palestinians, for example. Support for the war is the lowest that I can remember seeing from the American public for any adventure that's only 3 weeks old, even if you were to go back to Vietnam. So the support for the war is appallingly low, and yet, as you say, it's not taking much of a bite out of approval of Trump, and that's very hard to process.
Yeah, I think I'll wrap up I think because it's who we are. The other thing about peasants is that we're gullible. People moved thinking, the streets of New York are paved with gold. You sow nails in Nebraska and they grow crowbars overnight. People believe that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's part of who we are, and it's not always bad. There are real elements that came out of that background that are useful. For example, we don't mind work. Work's not a bad word in America. Peasants work hard. But there's this distrust of intellectualism, or this distrust of government, which runs really deep, and a certain amount of gullibility.
So would anything do for... the only thing that would do for Donald Trump was if he suddenly started sounding really intelligent?
Well, I think people underestimate. He's not dumb.
No, not in many senses. He's not dumb. In some senses, he's the dumbest man that ever lived.
Right, but he's willfully ignorant.
Yeah.
He decides not to learn.
Appetites. Feed my appetites.
Exactly.
Don't think.
And it's when people say, who was it that told him this was going to be successful?
Yeah.
There's no one there who tells him anything. He tells himself things.
And that's what he wants. And if he wants it, it becomes true in that moment, and achievable, and desirable, and inevitable, all at the same time.
And then when it doesn't, he has to come up. He has to keep, chopping and changing and attempting to win back that.
Yeah.
There's the three. It's the Trump era. He wants enrichment, he wants revenge, and he wants adoration. That sums him up.
And he's not getting enough of any at the moment, which is probably yet more reason to be rather chilled.
Yeah, but there's never enough. That's the problem.
They can never be enough. They can never be enough. No, because he's trying to fill an unfillable hole.
Yeah.
I feel obliged by my love of the United States of America and my hope that it returns to a semblance of normality to make my listeners aware of the Richard Hofstadter book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, which I think neatly encapsulates much of what you've been telling us, Michael. And I think you probably could describe Hofstadter as a philosopher.
Oh, he is brilliant. I agree, and I love that book.
And I thank Johnny for reminding me of its existence as well in the nick of time. Michael, thank you. Always a pleasure. And it probably is the wrong question, but it depends why you're asking it. If you're asking it as an almost... I don't know, as a corrective to angst, if you need to think about things in order to comfort yourself, then you have to ask the question of why he's doing it. And the fact that it hasn't got an answer is in and of itself comforting. But why are the American public going along with this? I think you need to be an American to answer that in the way that Michael did. I wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily suggesting that it's because of a deep strain of anti-intellectualism that runs through the American populace, but it kind of has to be, right? You see someone who feeds appetites, his own appetites and nothing else, and you kind of like it because it's really easy to understand. You serve up a side salad of grievance. Here's a man who is defined by grievance, even though he hasn't got much to be aggrieved about, apart from obviously a neglectful childhood, but a privileged one nonetheless in material terms. But if you've got genuine grievances, then someone who speaks the language of grievance will enjoy your support even as he sells you snake oil and lies to you as if it's going out of fashion, because it's the language of grievance that speaks to the emotional core of a person. And, of course, the bigger the emotional core of a person is, the smaller the intellectual. It's 11:51.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:55 is the time. Another quote to back up Michael's very, very thought-provoking point a moment ago from Isaac Asimov back in 1980, and I Am Incorrigible has sent this to me on Blue Sky from a work called A Cult of Ignorance that I haven't read. Anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. And that would have fitted perfectly into my last book. I'm sorry, it's a ridiculous thing to say. I got quite a few good quotes in there, but that one just sums up perfectly that false equivalence, doesn't it? Here's Pascal Lamy, the former head of the World Trade Organization, to talk to us about the World Trade Organization, something I had to do when I was presenting a programme on the BBC. And here's Andrea Leadsom to tell him why he's wrong about the World Trade Organization. If you can find a better example of the false notion that democracy means my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge than Andrea Leadsom deigning to lecture the former head of the World Trade Organization on the role and purpose of the World Trade Organization, then, in the immortal words of that philosopher, Les Dennis, I will give you the money myself. I mean, there it is. And they can see it. That's the problem, isn't it? Clever people can see it. Or at least thoughtful people can see it. I don't even know what clever means, but thoughtful people can see it, and some people hate thought. As Luke points out, many of the people who are calling the shots in the States at the moment want no government at all. believe that the markets should run themselves. We see it with the tech bros, the hedge funders, the Peter Thiels and the Elon Musks. So the people who bankrolled the Trump campaign would sort of welcome the removal of all checks and balances, all regulation, and just allow the pursuit of profit to be the only God that we worship, while, of course, pretending to worship this ludicrous phrase, Judeo-Christian gods, which is just a phrase that racists use to demonise Muslims. Speaking as a Christian, there are profound differences between my faith and Judaism, and some profound differences between my faith and Islam. But the idea that you lump two Abrahamic religions in together, as Farage increasingly does, not only does it insult the history of Jewish people and their persecution in this country when it was Christian, but it also makes a mockery of the most easily accessible religious doctrines from all three faiths. But of course, if you are an enemy of thinking, then a phrase like Judeo-Christian will land with you, even though it doesn't just mean nothing, it means worse than nothing. Hughes in Lewis, to steer us back to the conversation about Donald Trump, the conversation that may be a waste of everybody's time in terms of substantive results, but I think is therapeutic to have nonetheless. Hugh, what would you like to say?
Hi there. The first time I've got through, a bit nervous.
It's only me.
Yeah. I just think it's as with Trump, with a lot of things, it's his exceptionalism. You know, he believes he can do.
I can do whatever I want. I can do whatever I want, not just to women, but to the world. When you're a star, Hugh, when you're a star, you can do what you want.
But it's also he believes he can do the things that other people literally can't.
So that's the delusion. That's the delusion. It's the arrogance married with the entitlement added to the delusion.
Yeah, he's given all of these reasons from various advisors. You have lobby groups, you have Exeth wants to unleash his dogs of war. Now they're not bound by woke doctrine. But Trump just believes he can do it. Barack Obama couldn't do it. You know, Barack Obama...
Well, except he did do it, of course. I mean, he did bring them to the table and secure a deal that pretty much everybody qualified to comment thought was not only rather good, the best available, but also working. Crucially, it was working when Donald Trump set fire to it.
Exactly.
He can't bear that. He can't bear that. He's really motivated by a hatred of Obama, actually, isn't he?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. And I can't think of one reason why, this man hates the only black president that America has had.
No, nor can I.
It escapes me.
It must be something we could put our finger on. If we had a little bit longer, but we're going to be late for the news, Hugh.
Yeah.
So we'll have to look forward to trying to puzzle that one out next week. I don't know what you were nervous about. And by the way, if someone comes on and says that they're nervous, and then they are really nervous for the entire call, I won't end by saying I don't know what you were nervous about. I'll be caring and sympathetic, but I don't know what you were nervous about. I'm also very grateful to Robert, whose brain works rather like mine, because when I introduced Hugh in Lewis, my first thought was The Power of Love and Back to the Future. Which no one else gets except Robert, and now you, because of course I heard Huey Lewis and the news, no less, which if I'd timed it a tiny bit better, I could have actually ended by saying, that made me think of Huey Lewis and the news. And now it's the news. But it's not. There's a few more moments. Thank you, Keith. There we go. That'll take us a little bit further as well. Listen, after the news, I think I am going to return to one of my all-time favourite subjects, because the Labour government is finally making the right noises about Brexit. But should they be doing, and is it too late?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 12. How frivolous are you feeling? It is human nature to come off the back of a conversation as heavy and as important as the one we've been having for the first couple of hours. But I find myself feeling quite frivolous on Fridays. In fact, I might institute a feature called the Frivolous Friday Feature, or the Feeling Frivolous Friday Feature. Phone in. Thank you, Elliot. The Frivolous Friday Feature, phone in. The Feeling Frivolous Friday Feature, phone in. So I was thinking about having a vote on the Riley's Reform Roundup jingles. But I don't know whether or not that would be appropriate or even sufficiently mature for a programme of this calibre. I don't know. Anyway, it's on the board because Riley's Reform Roundup will be here at about 12:30. I also, listening to that story about the water companies and that docu-series, I failed there. I failed you there. I should have been all over that. In fact, I could show you on my phone when about once a month I remember that I've got a thing on my notes on my phone where I put down ideas for the show. That's what it's called. And you know when you're doing a notes and the top line goes in really big letters on the iPhone? I don't know if it's like that on other phones. So I've got it in ideas for the show. And then I write down some ideas for the show. And I had written down about 3 or 4 weeks ago, do this flipping water docu-series, the dirty water thing. It's flipping huge. It's massive. It's going to be like the post office. Ideas for the show. And then Donald Trump started a war. So it's all his fault. First week, I don't think we talked about anything else apart from Mystery Hour. We did 14 hours straight on Donald Trump's ludicrous war, which, of course, back then, not everybody agreed was ludicrous. But they do now. So that is my excuse, really, is the war. But I've got some good news for you from the world of the environment. In fact, it's just some lovely news that will make you proud to be, well, British in general, but specifically English, or in England, because... everybody in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, if they hop on a boat or a plane, will be able to enjoy the thing that I will tell you more about a little bit later in this programme. Or indeed, I will book a guest to tell you about later in this programme. And it's just a thing of absolute beauty. It also invites an opportunity for the best joke I've been sent on Blue Sky this week, but I need to take a bit of advice on whether or not we're going to share it on air. It might be a little bit too fruity. If I don't share it on air, then I will share it on Blue Sky after the programme. But the chairman of Natural England will be joining us this hour to tell us about the thing, what I want to talk about. And Henry Riley will be joining us at 12:30, which means we haven't got an enormous amount of time. It also means we probably won't do a vote on what is our favourite Riley's Reform Roundup jingle. It means we haven't got an enormous amount of time to focus on the conversation that I want to have next. And I'm going to begin with the words of Rachel Reeves, OK? And something she said on Tuesday. Today is Friday, just in case you're listening on catch-up. Brexit did deep damage. Someone else who's fond of alliteration. This is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, going there. Brexit did deep damage. She went on, let me say this directly to our friends and allies in Europe. The government believes a deeper relationship is in the interest of the whole of Europe. A little bit of a caveat, claiming that they were not trying to turn back the clock on Brexit, but Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, was not similarly cautious. Labour, he has said this week, should go into the next general election promising to rejoin the European Union. He hasn't really stopped making the case for joining the customs union and the single market since we were dragged out of it by a coalition of idiots. But the mayor went much further on Wednesday night when he suggested that the party should promise full membership at the next ballot. He said, in a conversation with the Italian publication La Repubblica, he said, we should, as a Labour Party, fight the next general election with a clear manifesto commitment. A vote for Labour means we would rejoin the European Union. I think it's inevitable. I don't know personally if you can undo a referendum without having another referendum. And maybe it's time now to contemplate that. But this is really significant. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Sir John Curtis, the doyen of psephologists and the professor of politics at the University of Strathclyde. He says that with those words at her lecture on Tuesday, Chancellor Rachel Reeves made it clear that there has been an important shift within the Labour Party, one that government ministers have been signalling for some time. Speaking in such overt terms about Brexit's perceived harms in part reflects a belief that as the government attempts to turn around the country's persistently sluggish economic performance, it must be more ambitious in its attempt to reset the UK's post-Brexit relationship with the EU. So they've still got red lines. No return to the single market or the customs union or the freedom of movement. The man who was, by some distance, the most powerful Labour politician in the country until the last general election, Sadiq Khan, goes much further. Some people suggesting he might be contemplating some sort of leadership bid, as Angela Rayner persuades precisely nobody that she isn't. But that's not the conversation we're having today. It's about whether or not this is the right thing to do for Labour, to move the conversation in the direction of the European Union, whether it's at 100 miles an hour, as Sadiq Khan is doing, or whether it is at I'll go on then. Whether it's at 52 miles an hour, as Sadiq Khan is doing, or whether it's at 48 miles an hour, as Rachel Reeves is doing. Is it a good move for Labour to do this? And let me tell you why I used to think it wasn't, although I reserved the right throughout that period to tell you when my mind had changed, when enough time had passed to make me change my mind. Let's see by the time I get to the end of this introduction where my mind is. Because I thought it was pointless at first for Keir Starmer to articulate any desire to undo any of the damage done by Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage and all the rest of them. You can make the list. I'll tell you something for nothing. None of them have faced any consequences whatsoever of their own catastrophic misjudgment, and that's being kind. Because what would it achieve? Apart from making centrist dads like me feel a bit better, apart from making the... you can't call us Remainers anymore, of course, because you can't remain in it anymore. But I don't know, what would you call us? I know, I've got a good word. The people who were right. It would just comfort the people who were right to know that we had a Prime Minister who acknowledged we were right. And we're always right. And we're always going to be right. And we'll always be right. And remember, not unlike Donald Trump's war, you can't support Brexit anymore because the reasons you were given for supporting it have all been disproved or turned out to be true or indeed contradicted by the people who made you various promises. So you become a liar if you still support it because the reasons you offered for supporting it in 2016 have all exploded in your face. But that's a conversation for a different day. The conversation for today is simply, is this going to achieve anything? Is this going to be right? I found myself responding to it very warmly. Not so much Sadiq Khan or Rachel Reeves' speeches, but Sir John Curtis's analysis thereof. It's a brilliant explanation. It runs to about 12 pages. It's on the BBC website, on their in-depth section, and it's under the headline, Why Labour's Brexit Focus Has Shifted from Leavers to Remainers. And he's still using that word, and who am I to quibble with Sir John Curtis? But it looks through the reasons why they're doing it and not the inevitability, but the rationale behind it and the reason and the voters that they might be seeking to pursue. And none of us will ever be as clever as Sir John Curtis when it comes to unpicking thorny issues like this one. But the numbers are extraordinary. They have been for some time. Of course, if you're relying upon a newspaper like the Daily Telegraph that will report Donald Trump's speech while removing the single most important parts of Donald Trump's speech, then you're unlikely to know anything about what the numbers are now like for regretting Brexit or wanting to undo Brexit, or if we had a referendum tomorrow, voting to rejoin the European Union. But I think that's moot as well. Because I just want to know whether or not you welcome the politics of it. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. The Labour Party is now, to varying degrees, because the Mayor of London is still part of the Labour Party, even if he's not part of the government, but the Labour Party is signalling that regret and repair with regard to Brexit is going to become part of their political platform. Now, 2 years ago, or 18 months ago, when they got into power, I told you that this was a silly thing to do because there is no meaningful prospect of repair. There's certainly no meaningful prospect of rejoin. If you think that the European Union is going to roll out a red carpet for us with a referendum or no on a rejoining platform while Nigel Farage is leaving in the opinion polls, then I have a bridge that you might like to buy. The European Union goes through enormous expense of energy and resources and cold hard cash in dealing with the mess that we make and insist they help clean up. Such is the consequence of trying to leave an organisation that was not really constituted in a way that ever imagined any member state would be stupid enough to want to leave. But here we are. So my main reason for not being particularly troubled by Labour's quietness on European Union or on Brexit, my main reason was that it was an unachievable goal. Certainly rejoining would be impossible until they can be reassured that there's no prospect whatsoever of the current government being replaced by a government that would try to undo all the good that had been done by the one before. And that's still true, right? No one's going to argue with that. The second reason why I didn't like it, where I felt any policy of regret and repair, if not rejoin, but rejoin can be, it's the 3 R's, so you can either have 2 R's or 3 R's. It's a Venn diagram. Regret, repair, they go hand in hand. Rejoin doesn't necessarily go with regret and repair. But if you want to focus on the first circle, just regret and repair, we're just a third country now. We get nothing. You don't have any bonus by dint of being an ex-member. There's no club in the world where when you stop paying your dues, you still retain some of the privileges that you got when you were paying your dues. This is a cold shower for people like me. It's a cold, hard lesson if you have some sort of emotional connection with Europe in general or the European Union in particular, because it counts for nothing. It counts for nothing. You stop paying your dues, you leave the club, you can't just pop in every now and then and use the sauna or the bar. That's it, you're out. So you have to negotiate from a starting point of 0, whatever concessions or accommodations you think you want. So those 2 things are still true, right? We can't rejoin, whatever Sadiq Khan says, until the European Union is persuaded that we're not going to have another fit of the vapours and smash ourselves in the face with a frying pan shortly after fixing the mess that we made last time. And you can't do much by way of repair without joining the single market or the customs union, I don't think. And again, I'm educated constantly by you on these things, but there's not a great deal of wiggle room. If you're not going to go Norway or Switzerland or similar, there's not a great deal you can do to improve the situation that we've got now. And those 2 things are still true. So why am I happy about this? Why do I think it's the right thing to do? That's arguably not the most important question for you to answer in the next 10 minutes. The most important question for you to answer in the next 10 minutes is, are you happy about this? Are you happy about this? 0345 6060 973. As Sir John Curtis explains in a wonderful article published today, Labour is shifting its Brexit focus from leavers to remainers. So it's no longer trying to butter up leavers who have been proved wrong about everything. I'm sorry if you're still not comfortable or happy with that conclusion, but it's not an opinion, it's counting. Labour is now moving its focus from them to remainers. And I want to know whether you think it is the right thing to do. Will it make any difference to you? Is it too little too late, or is it better late than never? OK? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. What do you think? Does it make you... I mean, you can have a go at why it makes me happy, because I'm not entirely sure. Does it make you happy that the Labour government is moving in this direction and the Labour Party as a whole is now moving its focus from people who were wrong in 2016 to people who were right? That's a bit inflammatory, isn't it? It's a bit provocative. It's deliberately provocative, but let me be a little more diplomatic. And yes, that is the sound of my tummy rumbling, Jill. It's nearly lunchtime and I've been so exercised this morning I haven't had time for my overnight oats. But the question is whether or not it makes you happy that they're doing this, that they are moving their attention, not from the wrong to the right, let's just say from the leavers to the ex-remainers, and what it is likely to achieve, OK? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Labour's Brexit focus has shifted from leavers to remainers, says Sir John Curtis, and me, I agree. I think you have to agree, looking at the evidence. But do you welcome it, and why? Hit the numbers now, you will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
So if you are going to be shifting the political focus from leavers to remainers, you don't do it in the way that I've just done it. You don't talk about idiots from 2016 who've been proved wrong about everything and instead focus attention on people who've turned out to be right about everything, because that's very, very unhelpful. Nobody likes to be reminded that they're stupid or that they've been duped or that they were misled, which is why Idiot's Corner can be such fertile territory most days, because people really don't like being shown the evidence of their own idiocy. So how does the government play this for people who are not in my tribe? That's a really important question. That, giving people the space without demanding recompense or reparations or public acts of penitence. How does the government simply create a new narrative, a new ecosystem, a new national story in which moving closer to Europe is just the obvious and inevitable thing to do, without recriminations and repercussions. I think that's horribly unfair. We should have recriminations and repercussions. We should all get written letters of apology from all of the people responsible for this catastrophe, but that ain't ever going to happen. What would that look like? If the government is going to try and reset the pendulum, how should it swing? I don't know the answer to that. Neither really do I know the answer to why I'm happy that they're doing this, despite being fairly confident that there's not a lot of substantive improvement or change they can make. Nicola is in Oldham. Nicola, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
Thank you for taking my call. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome
and I got
aboard.
through on the first call.
So there you go, a lesson for everybody there, you see?
Yeah.
You can. Don't hold back, just get involved.
Well, I've been wanting to ring you for weeks, actually, and I love listening to your rant this morning because it's exactly how I have felt for weeks.
Good.
In terms of Europe,
yes,
I really want us to start pushing forward. And, you know, we're looking at the conflict in Iran and everything else that's going on. You know, the demise of the relationship with America. And I just think this is the time to do it. They keep getting criticised in the press and the media. Everything that they do, they get criticised. So take us forward for the good of the country and use the business model and the security aspect. You know, they should be able to have evidence how much we will be better off financially.
Yeah, but they won't. People. I mean, you know
economically.
what happened though is that you can provide evidence, and Michael Gove will pop up and say, "Oh, I think we've all had enough of evidence. I think we've all had enough of experts," and you can show them that black is black and red is red, and they can claim that black is red and red is white, because that's what they did last time.
Well, they've just got to keep going louder and louder, and they've got to use the comparisons. You know, 10 years ago, this is where we were. 5 years ago, this is where we were. This is where we are now. This is where we're going to. Because they've got to evidence the financial... to get people on board, and it's not going to be like Farage, the Telegraph. They're never going to get on board with it. But they've just got to keep moving forward and get louder about...
What do they say? So let's acknowledge the existence of people who will never be. What's the word I want if I'm trying to be diplomatic and kind? People who will. Oh, I don't know. Well, I'll read you what Greg has to say. Get over it, James. Brexit was 6 years ago. Go and live in Europe if you think it's that great. So, I mean, leaving aside the fact that I do live in Europe, Greg, but you know, that's probably going to come as a major shock to him, who also lives in Europe. You're never going to reach people like that, because what they can't tell you is what they want you to get over. So what do you want me to get over, Greg? Well, get over the fact that I voted to make you poorer and less safe and less secure on the international stage, and your children have less freedom and you have less freedom, and I mean, that's what I'm supposed to get over, all of the things that are bad that he voted for. So leaving people like Greg, who I think we will reopen Idiot's Corner in his honour today.
I think you should.
So there you go, in you go. Leaving him out of the conversation, the normal people who were persuaded by bad actors to do something silly, how do Labour sort of usher them into the fold, get them on board without demanding recriminations or reparations?
You're never going to get everybody in the fold.
No.
They're not coming, end of. But you know, from what I'm seeing in the polls and the conversations, the majority of people are seeing what an absolute folly this was.
Yes.
And they can hold up the examples. You know, they bang on about migration day and night. Why aren't we hearing even louder that the migration imploded because of the Dublin Agreement, you know, that increased the boats coming, etc. Why can't they get louder with the positive
But where would they
aspect?
get louder? Where would they get louder? This is a question for the ages, isn't it? Is everything you're saying is accurate or arguable? Well, hang on. The Dublin Agreement isn't quite the panacea that a lot of people think that it is, because we weren't really taking advantage of it when we were signatories to it.
No, I know we weren't taking advantage of it, but we had it.
But the explosion in non-EU immigration is a direct consequence of the jobs that were being done by EU workers needing to be done by somebody, and that's why they call it the Boris wave. The news about the Boris wave today is that it hasn't caused an explosion in welfare payments or anything of the type, but that won't stop liars claiming it. So you can't get the platform for the truth, and you can't silence the liars. That's the problem the government has.
Where's Ofcom? Yeah.
That's a question for the ages, Nicola. Where's Ofcom? Indeed. 27 minutes after 12. Well, actually, to be fair, broadcasters are regulated. It's the newspapers that aren't, which is how the Daily Mail... Should we do that thing for the Telegraph again once more before we go home? It's how the Daily Telegraph can remove words from a Donald Trump interview when reporting it on its front page that are by far the single most important words in the entire interview. But not tell their readers that. Thank you. Stuart's in Dartmouth. Stuart, what made you pick up the phone?
Long-time listener, James, second-time caller. Can I just say, the last time I called you was around about the time of the election, and I compared how Rishi Sunak reminded me of the Spitting Image character. But that was the last time I called.
Which one? Which Spitting Image character?
I said it was Jeffrey Archer.
Yes.
But what I actually meant was David Steele.
Got it. He
used to live in that boot and jump about.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got it. All right. Well, you'll forgive me for not remembering, but thank you for refreshing my memory.
I think we should get back in as soon as possible for two main reasons. One for trade, and the other for defence. We're scrabbling around looking for money to improve our defence, and basically we haven't got it, whereas you look at Ursula von der Leyen the other day, turned around and said that there was billions available for every EU country to improve their defence. So, there's one thing there straight away.
That's actually a really good idea. So, I mean, the problem is you don't want to sell the rough with the smooth when the rough is the territory of charlatans and liars. But if you were simply to say, look, there might be some things about European Union membership that you don't like, but we need to have a collective defence force, an army,
Absolutely.
Effectively, and to be as in it as much as is possible, we need also to be in the European Union again.
Yeah.
That's a really strong... that's a really strong argument, actually.
I think somebody needs to be brave enough as well Ed Davey does it occasionally at Prime Minister's Questions, but somebody needs to be brave enough in the Labour Party to stand up and just say, look, these are the facts and this is how disastrous it's been, and to pave the way for something going forward.
I think that because that would be missing from the conversation last time out. Apart from the biggest Brexit mystery of all to me is why Nigel Farage, whose close friend, of course, Nathan Gill, is currently in jail for taking bribes from a Kremlin stooge for promoting Kremlin talking points in the European Parliament. But why Nigel Farage was so passionately opposed to a European army. I didn't understand that at the time, and I don't understand it now, although there is, of course, no suggestion that he's ever accepted money for parroting Kremlin talking points like his close friend and protégé, former leader in Wales, Nathan Gill. But the argument for a European unity, a European military union, if you like, a European army, is more powerful than it has ever been since the Second World War.
100%. 100%.
You're a very clever man.
If you look at trade as well, we're trying desperately to keep Trump on side and to keep our tariffs low, where, of course, if we hadn't left the EU, would we be having that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways that's more nuanced because the liars and the charlatans can always claim that actually, no, we can do... Was it Kemi Badenoch who signed an envelope in California and claimed it was a trade deal? I think it was. I mean, they were all queuing up to do it. It was the trussification of UK politics, which happily didn't last terribly long, but they were all claiming they'd signed trade deals when they'd signed nothing of the sort. And unfortunately, Private Eye makes a habit of crunching numbers, and if you actually put I think it's about 4% of our global trade, the fall in 4% fall caused by Brexit, and all of the new deals being signed are like 0.01%, and there's only about 3 of them anyway. So that is a little bit more nuanced, but I wonder if the biggest argument in favour of moving back towards Europe will turn out to be the military one. In a logical universe it would be, but of course if Vladimir Putin and his army of bots and trolls can persuade a population to put Donald Trump in the White House, help persuade a population to put Donald Trump in the White House, or to turn the United Kingdom into the first country in history to vote to impose economic sanctions on itself, then who knows what happens when the flag goes up again, when the race begins again, and the engines of influence move back onto your grandma's lawn. It's 12:31 and Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Have we got one?
Yeah.
There's a new one.
Gary in Western Australia sent...
Western Australia?
Very specific.
Wow.
Sent this.
Hey! How long is it, Keith?
Riley
Riley's Reform Roundup. Here's what's new today.
We could talk over a bit.
Policy, polls and headlines all laid out on the way.
Oh.
Riley's Reform Roundup.
Yeah.
Cuts through what they say. Turn it up, time to find out what's changing in the UK.
And then it's a bit of instrumental, I think, for us to talk over.
All right, let's draw a line. Next Friday.
Yeah.
Are you in?
Yeah.
Let's have a vote. Next Friday we'll pick the official, because I've got a funny feeling, Henry Riley, that Riley's Reform Roundup isn't going anywhere soon.
Well, there's a lot of demand in terms of the stories.
They just keep coming, don't they? So listen, let me begin with a joke.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
They announced their candidates in Scotland yesterday.
Yesterday.
So not yet 24 hours.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if the people they announced turned out to include an alleged racist, an alleged crook, and an alleged... what have we got? Got an alleged racist, an alleged crook, and an alleged Tommy Robinson fan.
Well, one candidate has already been suspended, James, less than 24 hours after they were announced as a Holyrood candidate. Stuart Niven was announced as Reform's Dundee City West candidate, as you heard yesterday afternoon.
Yes.
But just hours later, allegations have emerged about his financial conduct.
What?
He was one of 73 hopefuls set out for the party. The Herald has reported he has been banned from acting as a company director for 7 years after allegedly diverting thousands of pounds from a taxpayer-backed COVID loan into his personal account. It's alleged that he applied for a bounce-back loan of £50,000 in November of 2020 and received the taxpayer support the next day, and that the funds allegedly were then transferred to his personal account. The former paratrooper has said that the money was lost in an investment. A spokesperson for Reform said we take allegations like this very seriously, and investigations underway, and they're currently suspended.
So, I mean, do we know how the Herald could find this out in a matter of minutes, while the brilliant, first-class, absolutely A-grade vetting system that Nigel Farage keeps boasting about failed to unearth this allegation?
Well, they found it on Companies House, this information.
Hard, isn't it? How does one access Companies House records, Henry Riley?
Well, I've done so. You just sort of put the name in and say Companies House for this bit of...
And then it emerges that he has faced the penalty you described. So so the Reform UK vetting does not extend to Googling.
Well, in this one, this was missed. There are other cases, as you referenced, but before I tell you about them, James, our Scotland political editor Gina Davison did speak with the Reform leader in Scotland, Malcolm Offord, who had this to say about vetting.
And so you're convinced then that over the next few weeks, as people start to have a look at your candidates, that you're not going to have any horror stories thrown up as your party has had in the past?
So we've done a lot of vetting, and obviously for a new party to field 73 candidates in short order is a mammoth task. We've done that. We've done a lot of vetting. I can't predict whether there might be something pops out the woodwork, but right now we're happy that we've done the vetting. And this will be an interesting group of people who've done interesting things in the past. These are not professional politicians. 80% of those have never been politicians before. So by definition, they're going to be interesting people.
You said the word vetting a lot there. And you know...
And interesting.
Let's not be unkind. Let's just take our eye off the next few months, shall we? Mm-hmm. And just have a look at the next few minutes in the aftermath of that interview yesterday about how good their vetting was. So we've got one who stands accused of... you're
profiting from a COVID bounce-back loan.
Thank you. Yes,
is the allegation.
Legal training more recently than I have. What else did I say? An alleged crook, an alleged racist. Have we got an alleged racist by any chance?
Well, there is one candidate, a former Tory councillor, now a Reform candidate.
So someone who is not. Someone who's never been a politician, which was already the excuse that Malcolm Offord seemed to be offering up for the fact that the vetting would be so successful that loads of people did come out of the woodwork with dodgy histories.
Yes, they have been a politician, a Conservative councillor who was at one point censured for aggressive behaviour, called Humza Yousaf, the former First Minister of Scotland, a grandstanding Islamist moron.
Right.
Apologies, some of these are quite offensive, just to put them out there. A Brown FM, which is First Minister, and seemingly passed vetting to become a Reform UK candidate. Also said at one point he wanted a holy war. He was not British, in a series of social media comments that were unearthed by the Courier. This is Linda Holt, who is a taxi firm owner, elected as a Conservative councillor back in 2017, former deputy leader of the Tories on Fife Council, not anymore, need to make that point. But she was not re-elected in 2022. But at one point there was a standards investigation into, quotes, aggressive and disrespectful behaviour.
How do you know all this?
This is all. This is all in the public domain. If you search the name of the candidates.
So again, the vetting. Let's just listen to Malcolm Offord again, and just the first bit of that clip, the last clip that we played, and just count how many times he uses the word vetting while he's talking to our Scottish editor Gina.
And so you're convinced then that over the next few weeks, as people start to have a look at your candidates, that you're not going to have any horror stories thrown up as your party has had in the past?
So we've done a lot of vetting, and obviously for a new party to field 73 candidates in short order is a mammoth task. We've done that. We've done a lot of vetting. I can't predict whether there might be something pops out the woodwork, but right now we're happy that we've done the vetting. And this will be an interesting group of people who've done interesting things in the past. These are not professional politicians. 80% of those have never been politicians before. So by definition, they're going to be interesting people.
OK. So what happens if you Google this person about whom they've done a lot of vetting?
Well, you get these comments about the case of the conduct investigation, and also if you look at the social media, you can see the comments about Islamist moron. I do see Malcolm Offord on that particular case. I said she has only just become a candidate. She wasn't a candidate when she made those comments. I don't know.
But that's what vetting's for.
I don't know the context.
You don't just vet people on what they've done since you became a candidate. Otherwise, you would never vet anybody because.
He says, I'm very clear we've done a good vetting process. I don't know the context in which she made the remarks. Right. I don't know when she made the comments.
And, I don't know, should we go for the hat-trick?
Well, there's another candidate, Senga Beresford, who offered support for Tommy Robinson and called for Muslims to be deported.
Well, all of them?
Well, it was a sort of general term. She, at one point, was supportive of the rally in London. She said, I'm behind you all the way. That's to Tommy Robinson. She also backed deporting Muslims after responding to a post on X made by the far-right group Britain First, where she said they posted, in the UK, Muslims are demanding that Sharia law is implemented. I demand we deport the lot of them. Who's with me? And Beresford replied, me. Reform have told the Record in Scotland they are aware of the comments, which they say are not criminal.
Right. Well, that's a relief. So that's someone else they vetted.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more Scotland story.
So, no, a quick word on Yaxley Lennon, of course, because the things that he's currently being convicted for include, I think, immigration offences, mortgage fraud, assault, contempt of court. I mean, it's quite a long list, but, up with that sort of thing.
You're right there to say there have been assault, mortgage fraud, criminal convictions.
So we got the full hat-trick there. We've got an alleged crook, an alleged racist, and an alleged Tommy Robinson fan. They did, hang on, I quote the fella. They did a lot of vetting. We did a lot of vetting.
A lot of vetting.
A lot of vetting. Laura vetting, as the late, great Cilla Black might have said. On you go.
Or Malcolm Offord. Staying with Scotland, James, before the candidates were announced, there was, as you can imagine, a press conference to announce these things. Yes. Sarah Pochin was there, who's the MP for Runcorn and Helsby.
I hope there weren't any brown faces in the room.
It was described as a bizarre speech because at one point her auto cue went off. Let me play you a little bit of what happened, James.
I wanted very much to come up and be part of this conference today. Oh, my auto cue's frozen. And do you know what? The funny thing is about my auto cue freezing is my Chief of Staff and David Ball will go into a complete panic because once I start to ad-lib, the press have a field day. So, in fact, we were talking about the reformed tartan then, weren't we, whilst I'm just waiting for my auto cue. And I really wanted to come on in a reformed tartan burqa, but it apparently I just wasn't allowed. Do you know what? One day, let's have one of these events that aren't live streamed, and we'll do it. We'll do all the naughty stuff. We'll do all the bits that have gone wrong and all the effing and jeffing when we do our pieces to camera and all the rest. It'd be hilarious.
She's not supposed to say this out loud. She's not supposed to say, Christ, you should hear how racist we are when the cameras aren't here. She's not supposed to say that out loud, is she?
I think it's fair to say she was saying that they get very worried when there's no auto cue. The Labour Party said it took less than 30 seconds for Sarah Pochin to start making jokes about Muslims after her auto cue broke.
Right, well, the crowd liked it. It's also probably worth suggesting, and I know the pictures are usually better on the radio, especially in our case. But
well, speak for yourself.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Something weird happens to her when she realises the autocue is. It's like she's bored when she's actually trying to be a politician. But when the autocue goes off and she realises she can be a bigot for a moment or two before it comes back on again, and she explains why her own colleagues are really worried about how bigoted she would become when the autocue goes. It's like she suddenly becomes animated and excited. She literally perks. It's like someone's given her an injection of joy.
Well, she makes a reference that her chief of staff and David Bull, the chairman, would be worried when the autocue is broken, is what she's saying. Of course, Sarah Poachin's been in trouble many times, criticised many times, I should say.
She doesn't seem to have taken the criticism to heart, does it? Or indeed thought, perhaps I should be less open about the fact that I love being racist.
She was once got herself in hot water after holding a mug saying "Tute Keir" with an image of Keir Starmer wearing a hijab, and also called Prime Minister's questions to ask the Prime Minister if we should ban the burqa.
I think that was an Elliot Morris exclusive, that one about the mug with the Elliot Morris producing the programme today. Why? Forgive me, because I might sound a bit like an old git now, but why is that funny?
Well, you'd have to. I mean, I'm not.
And why would a tartan burqa be funny? What else have you got?
Can we go to Wales? A bit of a devolution special today,
we should, yeah.
James. And in fact, that's a different feature. No, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Is this what disgusting things will he do for coins?
That's what you're calling this this particular part of the programme. Reform UK leader...
Hang on a minute. That's what I'm calling this particular part of the James O'Brien...
Sorry, yeah. I just, making that point.
All right, hang on. Ben's been in touch. He says the quality of Riley's jingles is far and above the ones that you get on your own, James.
Yeah.
Clearly, you don't work hard enough to get more quality jingles. This is how last week ended. Carry on.
Nigel Farage recorded a message. This is, as you say, this is all part of this tranche of sort of cameo videos that have been released. I won't tell you how much yet, but this is one video that's prompted a lot of attention. Nigel Farage, let's just listen to one of these cameo messages about Wales.
Gutted I couldn't attend the wedding. I wanted to come, but I heard that half the guests were Welsh, and I don't know. Who knows what would have happened with all those foreign speakers there? I don't know. Anyway, Sam, I hope Toby will make you very happy, as I know you will him.
Welsh people... Whoa, that's not going to go down very well in Wales.
Well, it hasn't really. One reform source told me that that's the last thing we need. Plaid Cymru have criticised this, Labour, the Conservatives. James Evans, who's a reform member of the Senedd, said it was for Mr Farage to answer for his own words, but the Welsh language is very important for reform. And someone reminded me it's the Welsh language over 1,500 years old. A spokesperson for Mr Farage said a cameo is a short personalised message requested by members of the public and should not be treated as political statements or campaign activity.
And as part of this feature, disgusting things he'll say for money, how much money did he get paid for this disgusting thing that he said?
Well, this video with regards to Wales was in July 2025 and he was paid £106.
Wow. So telling Welsh people speaking their native language in Wales that they are foreign speakers, probably be trying to deport them next, so perhaps they should count their lucky stars. That's a lot of stories. Are we done?
I know. There's two really quick ones.
Yeah, go on then.
Yeah? Nottinghamshire, very quickly, Reform UK have been criticised for appearing to remove journalists, Nottinghamshire Live, from the chamber ahead of a public meeting. There's history here because at one point Nottinghamshire Live were not allowed to interview... Yes, you might remember this. The leader, Mick Barton, there was a ban from attending public council events, receiving press releases and speaking to councillors. Listen to this exchange. Steve Carr from the Broxtowe Independents challenging the Reform UK chair, Jan Gould.
I want to ask clarification as to why the press are no longer allowed in this council chamber. I've been a councillor here for many, many years, and the press have always been allowed in the council chamber. But now, for some reason, they're going to be made to sit up there. And I don't think it's right. I think it's undemocratic, and I think it's a retrograde step for this council.
The press can hear and they can see. There is no reason for them to be down here with us, and at that, I want to get on with the work of this council.
Respect, Madam Chairman, that isn't an explanation for why this decision has been taken.
It's my explanation, Councillor.
So the allegation was this particular journalist, was actually only one at the time, from Nottinghamshire Live, wasn't allowed in the room when they had been in the past. A spokesperson for the authority has now clarified it's because people needed to receive awards during the meeting and they were reserving it for them, but clearly based on that exchange, it didn't seem like that was always the case.
Free speech, eh? For thee, but not for me. Or for me, but not for thee. And finally?
Lastly, this is
That's
Kent.
6, is it? 7?
This is number 7 now.
Stories.
Yeah.
Crikey. It only began as a feature about 3 weeks ago. It was only supposed to last until lunchtime.
Kent, which we often speak about, which is
we certainly do.
Big council that Reform took over.
Hang on a minute. That's the one we're supposed to watch to find out how they'd run the country.
It was described as a shop window by Nigel Farage. Opposition councillors have said that a motion by Nigel Farage's party, they launched this immigration emergency. It's been regarded as a U-turn, James, because you may remember I told you that they'd withdrawn this motion because they'd U-turned. They now appear, the allegation is they've U-turned again. But curiously, as part of this, within the immigration emergency, there is one bit where it talks about unsubstantiated claims that migrants spread diseases. So, for example, TB, something that the Director of Public Health there has said is not based on evidence. And obviously, it's a busy time for public health in Kent at the moment with the meningitis outbreak as well. The motion claimed there was an invasion of refugees coming to Kent and used rhetoric such as fighting age men. It said most of the men leaving their women and children in their home countries. It also talked about, quotes, foreigners committing crimes.
So, I mean, with the meningitis outbreak in Kent, which you'd think might be higher up their list of priorities, perhaps, there are attempts here to somehow link immigration to disease outbreak?
It said in the motion, a number of infectious diseases are believed to be on the increase, potentially due to having been carried by migrants.
Any evidence for that?
Those claims are unsubstantiated in terms of the evidence that was in that same document.
Doesn't stop them, though, eh? So how many is that all week, then?
7. Oh, you tested me now. It's 3 on the Cameo one.
Yeah.
And if 5...
What, the Cameo one?
Sorry, the
disgusting things you'll say for coins.
That. And there's... it's double...
Double figures?
Yeah.
Is it the biggest ever?
I think it might be the biggest ever. I think it might be 18 or 19.
And they've announced that he's not going to do any more cameos for now.
Yes, for security reasons.
Shut up.
That was part of the reason.
Security reasons?
Well, because they're sort of not sure people might try and use it for rogue reasons to get messages of Nigel Farage endorsing all kinds of things.
More of that next week on the things he'll say. Any comment from him? Any apologies? Any kind of sense of regret for any of these things, or possibly even the bloke that they announced yesterday who's already been suspended? Any comment from the man himself?
No. Candidates did. No. They haven't.
No.
They've
No. No.
So how do you trust anything you say?
Wrong.
And that concludes this week's Riley's Reform Roundup. Well done, Henry.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Henry.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Tony Juniper will squeeze himself neatly into the time available. The chairman of Natural England is here because my favourite story of the week involves the longest... Well, you tell us, Tony. What has King Charles been opening this week, and what have your organisation been putting epic amounts of work into since Gordon Brown was Prime Minister?
Yes, indeed. That's how long ago this started. And yesterday was the culmination of 16 years' work when Natural England was delighted to be on the south coast with His Majesty the King to open the King Charles III England Coast Path, which is the longest managed coastal trail on planet Earth.
Wow. 2,700
miles long, going around the English coast. And if you get to the top on the east side, you can cross across to the west via Hadrian's Wall, another trail there. And then you can walk down the Welsh border along Offa's to meet with the southwestern side, and then round Devon and Cornwall and back along the south coast and up the east side again. I don't know if anyone is planning to do it yet, but if they were going to do it, it's quite a long walk, but spectacular, covering this incredible coastline, which is so varied because of this amazing diverse geology of the British Isles, amazing different scenery from open coastal flats on the east side to those towering cliffs in the west, amazing wildlife, and of course an incredible historic asset there as well for us all to enjoy.
What kind of obstacles have you had to overcome? Because you mentioned Cornwall, and I think immediately of a holiday destination when my children were young that was on an ancient estate where access to the coast was confined to people who were there at the landowner's invitation. So that's just one of the things, let alone geographical obstacles that would have had to have been negotiated.
Well, exactly that. So some areas of coast, I mean, lots of the coast has been open for a very long time, of course. course, but some of it has been off limits to the public, and you would have been trespassing in some places. So we fixed that through working with landowners, creating rights of way through powers that local authorities have, making sure government's happy with the approach that we've taken. So there's a whole set of issues there linked with access rights, some practical questions in terms of how you get across an estuary and how you navigate crossing points where the sea comes in. There are some areas that have had to be boardwalked, some areas where we've tried to make it more accessible for people to be able to get in who've got limited mobility. And then also some parts of the coast are extremely sensitive for wildlife, and so we've had to work carefully to ensure that coastal access isn't going to interfere with the protection of ground nesting birds, for example. And at Natural England, that's a big part of our work, of course, is the protection and enhancement of the natural environment alongside helping people get outside to enjoy it. So we have to do both things at once, facilitate public enjoyment and look after the nature.
I noticed that it had already appeared on some Ordnance Survey, recently released, presumably the online Ordnance Survey maps. So my final question, Tony Juniper, will be about the signposting. Is it all very clearly signposted? If somebody just sort of heads coastwards now, would they be able to find the path that they need to be on very, very quickly?
Yeah, so this is part of the offer, is that it's waymarked. And so I was out yesterday and I could see the signs, and basically my colleague Neil Constable, who's led this work for a decade and a half, his basic point is you hit the coast and you can turn left or right and it's marked, and there it all is.
Magical. It's magical, mate, isn't it?
It's fantastic, isn't it?
It's the best thing. The very best. Congratulations to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Seriously, at Natural England, and to you, and of course to Neil Constable, who, as you say, has been instrumental in leading this. Sheila Fogarty has written something for somewhere about something. What are you waving at me now?
I'm waving my phone. I was very excited by this story.
Right, it's my favourite story of the week.
I think it's great and it's really good news. And I wrote a piece for the LBC app about it in praise of access to the natural world.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
There it is. And that's it from me for today. I haven't had time. I was so excited by that story to tell you about this week's Full Disclosure, which is with the restaurateur Jeremy King, who... if you haven't heard of, you should have done, and you will have done by the time you finish listening to it. And if you have heard of, then, like me, you'll be absolutely fascinated to find out more about his life and career. I'll tell you one thing and one thing. So he the Caprice, the Ivy, he's just reopened Simpson's in the Strand, probably the finest restaurateur in this country the last 50 or 60 years, or longer, the last century. But at the beginning of his career, when he was still a teenager, he had a place at Cambridge, and he'd just read The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt, and he had to decide whether or not he was going to take up his place at Cambridge or pursue his career in hospitality. And he made his decision after rolling a dice. Crazy stuff. He's also been painted twice by Lucian Freud, would you believe? If you missed any of today's show, you know what to do. And get hold of the Full Disclosure podcast via your global player or the LBC app, which you can download for free from your app store now. Tom Swarbrick with you at 4, but now it's time for... these boots are made for walking.
They are indeed made for walking, yeah. That's a great way of describing it.
James O'Brien on LBC.